Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was, in fact, a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
The Prime Minister asks world leaders to stand firm against Russia during the G7 summit.
Good morning. It's 6 o'clock on Monday, the 27th of June. This is Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn, Holmes and Isabel Webster.
Very good to see you. Nice to have you on board. Here's what's leading the news this morning.
The Prime Minister will address world leaders at the G7 summit today, where he's expected to ask them to take urgent action to end Putin's grip on global food prices. It comes as he agrees a new military surge in Ukraine with the French President Emmanuel Macron.
Missiles struck Kyiv for the first time in 3 weeks. The city's mayor called the attacks an attempt to intimidate Ukraine ahead of the speech by President Zelensky to the G7 today.
A gas explosion in Birmingham that destroyed a house and badly damaged 3 others has left a man with life-threatening injuries. 4 other men suffered more minor injuries but were discharged by paramedics.
And Wimbledon starts today. Full capacity crowds for the first time since the start of the pandemic. All eyes will be on Emma Raducanu and Sir Andy Murray as they take to centre court on this day one.
And remember, you can join any of our discussions. Email us gbviews@gbnews.uk or you can tweet us @gbnews.
And we're also on the lookout for a champion, a people's champion, which could be you. If you know of someone in your community who deserves a special shout-out, who does work above and beyond what's expected, please do get in touch and nominate.
Yeah, we really want to celebrate some of the good things that are happening in our communities as well. A little positive look at what's going on right across Britain. Email us with the subject Breakfast's People's Champion.
Yeah, I mean... Right, OK, getting this underway on this Monday morning, the Prime Minister will address Western leaders at the G7 summit in Bavaria today. He's expected to urge them to end President Putin's stranglehold on food prices.
And to stand strong in the face of Russian aggression. Well, it comes after the Prime Minister held talks yesterday with the French President Emmanuel Macron, where they agreed on a renewed surge in military support for Ukraine.
OK. Well, for more on all of this and the political future of the Prime Minister, beside me is Chris Curtis. Chris is head of political polling at Opinium Research. Chris, good morning to you.
Morning.
So Boris Johnson, just reading in the newspapers yesterday, seems quite defiant. He says that he's actively thinking about fighting for a third term. He believes he can win that. What do the viewers think, and the voters think?
Well, I mean, they're not even thinking about a third term yet. But when you ask them what they think should happen to Prime Minister Boris Johnson right now, it's certainly what disagrees with what Boris Johnson thinks should happen to Boris Johnson right now. A majority of voters now think he should resign. Somewhere around 1 in 3 of those who even voted Conservative at the last general election think that it's now time for the Prime Minister to resign. So, when it comes to Boris Johnson, he needs to maybe forget about a third term and convince the public that he's delivering and should stay in the job right now.
It's interesting, though. We're going to hear from 3 GB viewers and listeners today, none of whom will think like that. They are big Boris supporters. Are they a rarity?
Well, they're certainly a minority now. And that's different from what we were seeing before. In the 2019 general election, Boris Johnson won a landslide election victory. He managed to achieve what Theresa May completely failed to achieve, and convinced those who voted Leave in the referendum that he alone could get Brexit done. And that's why he was given such a large majority in Parliament. But since then, it is fair to say that views of him have changed quite dramatically. Firstly, over Partygate, but also as the cost of living crisis goes on, there is a view that his government isn't responding well enough to that crisis. And that's meant that the sort of median voter in this country no longer thinks that he's the kind of strong, competent leader who can deliver on those kind of things that he promised in that general election.
It does feel like Groundhog Day, doesn't it, though, when you hear backbenchers and, indeed, you've got, Oliver Letwin on Friday quitting as well from the Cabinet over these renewed calls for him to go for another vote of confidence. I mean, is that likely to happen? How vulnerable is his position? Because, of course, 40% of his own MPs wanted him out, but he won his confidence vote. He should be safe for a year, and yet here we are with more letters being submitted.
Yeah, no, it does feel like Groundhog Day, and we've been having this conversation for quite a while now. Look, I mean, but there's, can the Prime Minister come back from this? His popularity has waned quite dramatically in recent months. It's certainly possible for him to come back to this and to regain that stature among the public. I think it's going to be incredibly difficult. If you're asking me my personal opinion, I think it's unlikely he's going to end up coming back from that situation because, on top of his current unpopularity, he faces a cost of living crisis, he faces a potential recession, NHS, problems like that. He's going to find it very hard to turn it around. But yes, you're right. Like, what does the Conservative Party do in that situation? Well, are they going to get rid of him, or are we going to keep having this conversation on repeat for months and months and months?
Well, except he's on the world stage for the next couple of days at this G7 summit. That's bound to do him good.
Yeah, I think that's true. When you look at, the wide range of issues we ask about, do you think Boris Johnson is doing well or badly on all of these issues? On most of those questions, people say badly now, but there's a few exceptions to that. One of which is defence and national security, and the other one of which is a lot of these foreign affairs issues. The response to Ukraine, for example, one of the things he'll be talking about at the summit today. That's an area where voters think that he's doing particularly well.
OK, Chris Curtis, really interesting to get your thoughts, as always. Thank you very much from Opinion. Thank you. We'll talk now to Sam Lister, who joins us from the G7 summit in Bavaria. Very good morning to you, Sam. A busy day ahead then for the G7 leaders. The Prime Minister speaking, but they'll also be tuning in to speak to President Zelensky of Ukraine as well.
Yes, President Zelensky will give an address this morning. We're not sure if we're going to actually see the footage ourselves, but he will certainly be addressing those leaders. And this summit is all about Ukraine, really. Obviously, there are other issues being discussed, including climate change today, but really the focus is on Ukraine and how the international community can continue to keep up momentum.
OK, and so just give a flavour of what's happened so far at the G7. Yesterday, there was this bilateral meeting between President Macron...
Very bad line.
...and Boris Johnson. Yes, a bad line, don't worry. That's what happens when you're broadcasting from what looks like the front cover of an Alpen cereal box. The beautiful, beautiful scenes there. Look, the Prime Minister describing that meeting with President Macron yesterday as being le bromance.
It was a really fascinating bilateral meeting between Boris Johnson and President Macron. Obviously, these are two leaders who've had big tensions, particularly if Brexit obviously has really fueled divisions between Boris Johnson and President Macron. And they've really not actually got on pretty much the whole of the last 2 years. So yesterday we were kind of expecting more of the same, that they would clash over things. I think Boris Johnson has felt frustrated at times at having to lead the push on Ukraine and wanting France to be to be up there with him. But actually, yesterday, quite late on, we had a briefing from Number 10 insiders who told us actually this was the bromance, that they've reset their relationship, that they want to put everything behind them and focus on Ukraine and move forward. So I think it was quite an interesting meeting.
Really, that relationship, because in many ways they've got a lot of similarities, haven't they? Sort of charismatic individuals that have had sort of personal success but might not have a united party behind them, lots of domestic problems. You can understand why perhaps there might be some sort of kinship there. Whether or not that can be fruitful in terms of policy is another matter.
Well, this is it. And actually, although they have had these tensions over the last 2 years, they've got a lot in common at the moment. As you say, they've both got massive domestic issues to face. And there is almost an element when you get to these summits that, it's a very small band of people. It's very lonely at the top. These are the people who actually understand what it's like to be there. And actually, President Macron and Prime Minister Johnson, they're in a very similar position at the moment. So maybe there are things they can chat about and how to cope with those domestic pressures. And they almost take refuge in the international scene, don't they? They can walk tall on the world stage and look great when they're talking to the world leaders and leave those domestic pressures behind. So I think they do share quite a lot in common at the moment.
Sam, what are you hearing about Macron? I mean, now that he's got his backside kicked in the elections in France, is it true, we hear this talk that he's looking to start a mini EU club?
Yeah, well, this was interesting because there were the two things that were very interesting aside from the international side of yesterday's bylaw. One was that what they didn't talk about was the small boats issue, and one was this issue about a kind of secondary EU, a parallel EU, if you will, that Macron is trying to push. Now, it's a very controversial idea. Brexiteers absolutely hate it. They see it as trying to drag Britain back into the EU by the back door. It's a kind of Macron describes it as a political community. So you have stronger ties to Brussels, even if you're not part of pushed this at the meeting yesterday. The French press here were told about this. The British press weren't told by Number 10, which obviously raised some eyebrows and makes you wonder why. The French press were told that actually Boris Johnson enthusiastically received this idea, which you can imagine wouldn't go down so well in Brexiteer circles. So we asked Number 10 why we weren't told about this. Was he enthusiastic about this? And they were completely denying it, saying actually Boris Johnson was just being polite when Macron was raising this idea. So we'll have to see.
Politics, eh? The front of the Telegraph is interesting this morning. We're just looking at pictures of President Biden there, and there's talk that Biden may well be a bit of a roadblock for Boris Johnson when he speaks later today. Boris Johnson proposing to try and tackle the cost of living crisis by encouraging people to grow more food. But this is apparently threatening American isolationism and climate commitments. Could there be a bit of a row brewing between the two North Atlantic countries?
Yeah, possibly. But what's also interesting is that actually Boris Johnson and President Biden, they're not having face-to-face, one-to-one talks. They're not having any bilateral meetings at this summit, which was surprising to us. Obviously, you know, as great allies, the UK and the US, you would expect that. It's not happening. Now, we're told by Number 10 that it's not a snub. It's just that actually President Biden is only meeting the host nations, so Germany at this summit and then Spain at the NATO summit to follow. So we'll read of that what you may, really.
Meanwhile, Prime Minister Boris Johnson, as we've been discussing this morning with Chris Curtis, is going to be overseas. He's just been in Kigali in Rwanda. He's now in the Alps in Bavaria in Germany, not likely to be back home for some days. And meanwhile, sort of a lot of, I don't know what you could describe it as, perhaps discussions behind the scenes about whether or not his position is tenable, and also talk about whether or not he can afford a cabinet reshuffle.
Yeah, it sounds like any plans for a reshuffle will be delayed until the autumn. But, I think reshuffles are so destabilising. Why would you do it? You've got a cabinet that's incredibly loyal to you. They could have caused trouble for Boris Johnson this week. They didn't. So why cause trouble for yourself by shuffling the pack? It doesn't really make any sense. So I don't think we'll see that imminently. I think Boris Johnson needs to keep as many people loyal as possible at the moment.
People who could potentially be vulnerable, though, if there was to be a cabinet reshuffle. George Eustice amongst those names. We've got him on the programme with us a little bit later on. Do you think he'll be sighing with relief this morning?
Well, look, nobody wants to lose those cabinet jobs, do they? He has been one of the ones who has been slightly more outspoken about the issues Boris Johnson's faced over recent weeks. But I think there is a sense that he's got a big job to do, that he's getting on and doing it. So why would you move him at this moment? And I think I'm sure he'll be relieved to hear that no reshuffle is imminent.
Thanks for bearing with us with that line. We'll leave you to the lovely, beautiful Bavarian Alps and speak to you again a little bit later. Thank you.
Let's have a look at what's happening news-wise with the time coming up to 14 minutes past 6. A summit will take place in Scotland today, held by the First Minister Nicola Sturgeon, to look at ways to tackle an increase in protests outside abortion clinics.
It comes ahead of a proposed bill to put 150-metre buffer zones in place to prevent intimidation and harassment.
Prince Charles has followed in his father's footsteps in becoming patron of the Royal College of Surgeons of Edinburgh. Now, this comes a day after the Sunday Times reports that the Prince of Wales had accepted cash donations totalling €3 million from a former Qatari Prime Minister. If you've got a view on that, let us know. It's something we'll be discussing throughout the programme.
Wimbledon gets underway today with full capacity crowds for the first time in 3 years. Novak Djokovic will defend his 2021 title, while Rafael Nadal will make his first appearance in the Grand Slam tournament since 2019.
I was just looking at a survey in the papers yesterday, which is about what the colour of your car says about you. Now, I have found controversially, if you get cars that are outside the norm in terms of colour, it may appeal to you, but it rarely appeals to anyone else. So I've bought 2 green cars in my time. One a very bright Kermit the Frog green, which was a definite no-no. Find that very hard to sell that. But the other one was called British Racing Green.
Oh, that's a nice colour.
That's a lovely colour, yeah. And the trouble is, though, it's fine until you bring it to a salesperson and they go, people don't like green cars, Don't like green cars, you'll not get what you should for that one. Yeah.
Well, apparently you can either be an owl, a hermit, or a chili pepper, dependent on what colour car you go for. If you like a red car, you're described as a chili pepper because you like people to look at you. It's the red motor love to live life in the fast lane. You stand out on the roads and you're a confident person who enjoys risk-taking. I'm not a red car kind of gal.
I've never had a red car in my life. It's not that I'm against them, but I've never had one.
I had a white car as my first car.
Yes, wedding
I think
car?
it was... No, wedding car was traditional, old-fashioned one, but my white car was a Polo 1-litre engine, only had 4 gears, and it was white because it was the cheapest one. Yes. Although there was one that was vomit colour, which is sort of like, we used to call it parrot vomit colour, sort of orangey colour, and my mum wanted to get that one because it was even cheaper, but I
That's
thought,
why, because it was
I
parrot
just didn't
vomit
want
colour,
the parrot
wasn't
vomit
it?
colour, so we settled on white.
So that was your most controversial, risky
Now I'm a black
colour.
car driver because I'm boring, but I like to think it's just classy, it's not too difficult to keep clean.
I've probably had more silver-coloured cars than...
Oh, silver's in here. There's something I can tell you about that. If you're silver, you're a heron. Surprisingly, you aren't flashy.
Yeah, surprisingly.
Despite being likely to have many attributes to those who own grey cars, you just prefer the prestige of silver.
I've had 2 metallic blue cars.
Oh, that's nice.
And I do like metallic blue.
Yeah, that's nice.
That's quite nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, but there you go.
I'm all about low maintenance in my life these days. Anything that needs cleaning all the time, a white car, no good
But
for me.
but there's that dilemma that a lot of people will say a black car is harder to keep clean than a white car. A black car will show up dirt more than a white car. I mean, I'm not really sure believe that, but that's often...
Maybe urban dirt, because, I mean, obviously, if you're out in the countryside, you get all the mud on the car, on a white car, it would show up. But if you're actually in a city, how often I'm getting these days is these sandstorms in the rain? All the time at the moment. My car's lovely and clean. I go outside and it's filthy again just from the rain.
I'm surprised there's any sand left in the Sahara.
Climate change, isn't it? I don't know.
Well, it's just, it's a wind, isn't it? It's a Sirocco wind or something. Because the car called Sirocco, of course.
Oh, there is.
Yeah.
But look, what kind of car do you drive? Send us a picture, no less. Let us know what it says about you, what you think it says about you anyway, or perhaps what your other half thinks it says about you. My husband's always wanted a car this colour, yellow. It's my idea of hell. Yeah, not for me.
What can we say? What can we say? I wouldn't be looking to sell that one quickly after he buys that one. Right, the time is 18 minutes past 6. A very good morning to you. What we're going to be doing, incidentally, there's a lot of people get in touch with us and say, we'd like to be a GB viewer and be on your programme. And they do, and then they just lie in bed all morning, but can't get them. So we are trying to get a number of you. You know who you are. If you're listening,
You'd
phone in.
agreed to talk to us and you've gone AWOL.
Phone in.
Billy.
Yes, in Stoke. So basically, if you are waiting for a call from us, something's going wrong, so phone us and try and get in touch with that. But we're now going to talk about Birmingham. Terrible explosion yesterday. It destroyed a house. The pictures are really frightening.
Yeah.
It also, 3 other houses in the street really badly damaged, and a man's been left with life-threatening injuries.
Yeah, and 4 other men suffered more minor injuries but were discharged by paramedics. Well, emergency services were called just after 8:30 last night to the incident on Dulwich Road in King Standing, and we can speak to Martin Ward-White. He's the area commander of the West Midlands Fire Service. A very good morning to you. Just talk us through what you found when you arrived and what a difficult situation that is from your perspective.
Good morning. So, crews received multiple calls last night at 8:30 to an explosion in King Standing, Birmingham. On arrival, what we were faced with was 1 property that was completely demolished and 3 that had received substantial damage. 1 male casualty was taken, obviously, immediately to hospital after being rescued from the property, and a further 4 casualties were seen and discharged on scene by the ambulance service. So overnight, crews have been working with colleagues from the gas board, electricity board, police and ambulance to make the scene safe, and to also try and restore some of the utilities to the rest of the properties in the street, as obviously, clearly, understandably, we had to shut them off last night.
So, Martin, are you any closer to being able to know what caused this explosion?
So, because of the hazards and the risks last night, we were unable to start the investigation overnight in darkness. But that investigation is going to start this morning and will be a joint effort between West Midlands Fire Service, West Midlands Police, and also the gas board as well. So, at the moment, we don't have a cause. That will be under investigation.
Automatically, we would assume, and obviously we're speculating at the moment because there's an investigation, as you say, underway, but you would think this is probably likely to be some sort of gas explosion. How do you approach that then as a fire service to make sure that your men and women are safe and that the people in the area, I mean, obviously an evacuation has to take place, but how do you get in and treat a fire if you think there could be some sort of gas leak?
Well, clearly, as a fire service, we will take risks where there's savable life. And indeed, when we turned up yesterday, the crews, along with police colleagues and also members of the public, did what they could initially, given sort of the level of risk and hazards involved. We also utilised specialist equipment as well that helped us, without having to go into the property, to be able to search the properties for life as well. So obviously these incidents do present a significant risk, certainly on arrival. But as I said before, you know, with the gas board and electricity board here overnight supporting us, we have been able to make the area safe for residents and the local community as well.
Well, you stay safe as well, Martin, you and your team. We're going to try and speak to you throughout the morning if you come any closer to being able to establish the exact cause of what went on. But for the moment, thank you very much indeed, Martin Ward-White, West Midlands Fire Service Area Commander. Thank you. And just to confirm, there is a man seriously ill in hospital, and there are 4 other injuries associated with that. When you look at the residential street there, you look at that explosion and fire, you just wonder why there aren't more injuries.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, just imagine just going to whatever might have happened, 8:30 in the evening, a casual Sunday evening, preparing for your week ahead, and that unimaginable thing happening. I also always think it's a good moment to just really appreciate the emergency services, firemen and women, so incredibly brave. And as he said, we will always take risks when there is a potential to save life. And aren't we just, well, we're just so indebted to the emergency services, and I think they're so brave and so well trained as well.
Well said. We'll take a break there. Coming up, barristers getting ready to strike. This is all to do with legal aid. We're going to be hearing from a former police superintendent who says it'll have a really bad effect on victims. All that to come after your weather picture that starts today and the week.
Looking ahead to today's weather, and the UK is looking rather unsettled for a time, with showery conditions gradually spreading eastwards. Let's take a look at the details. So, by the middle of the day, the worst of the showers should be clearing from southwest England to leave most parts dry with some sunny spells. However, temperatures will be disappointing for late June. Meanwhile, showers will be breaking out more widely across the southeast, and here a few of them could turn heavy with a chance of some thunder. Across Wales, 1 or 2 light showers are likely, but drier and brighter weather will gradually be spreading in across the country from the west. A few heavy and possibly thundery showers will affect the East Midlands, whilst across Birmingham and other more western areas the showers will start to ease, with more in the way of sunshine developing. Across northeast England, a mix of bright spells and scattered locally heavy and perhaps thundery downpours are on the cards, with temperatures close to 20 degrees in the sunniest spots. Edinburgh and other eastern parts of mainland Scotland could also catch some hefty showers around noon, but across the rest of Scotland the showers should be less heavy and fewer in number. The middle of the day doesn't look too bad for Northern Ireland though, as here any showers will be very isolated, with most parts staying dry and at times quite bright. Heavy showers then will ease across eastern parts to leave a mostly fine end to the day, although rain will arrive across Northern Ireland later. And that's how your weather is shaping up for the rest of your Monday.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV. On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Still to come on the programme this morning is Ghislaine Maxwell is placed on suicide watch ahead of her sentencing. That's going to be tomorrow in New York. We're going to be speaking to Lisa Bloom. Lisa Bloom is the attorney representing Epstein victims, who says that justice delayed is just justice denied. 6:45 talking to her.
Also today is back to full capacity after 3 years, but Wimbledon is back. That's at 7:15. We'll be live from the queue. Lots of people trying to get in, get to centre court and see who they might be able to see today.
Yeah, and the weather looking good this morning. You can join in any of our discussions today. You can email gbviews@gbnews.uk. Really thankful everybody who sent in their pictures of their cars. We're talking about car colours and what it says to you. What we're just trying to do is we've got to blot out your registration and things, and then we'll get them turned around and we'll show those as the programme progresses. You can also tweet those pictures to us at GB News.
So last week it was rail workers, and today criminal barristers have voted to strike in an escalating dispute with government over legal aid funding.
Now, these strikes are likely to cause chaos in the criminal court system in England and Wales. So let's go to our East of England reporter, Ed Crawford, who's outside Ipswich Crown Court for us this morning to talk about the effects of all of this. Ed, good morning to you.
Good morning, Eamonn. Yes, I am outside of Ipswich Crown Court today because today is the first of a 2-day strike action this week by the criminal barristers. Now, the barristers will be adding 1 day of walkout each additional week until the culmination of their strike action, which is the end of the month, and it's a 5-day walkout in total. Now, these strikes have come about as a result of an unresolved row with the government over the future of legal aid spending. Now, back in November, a report submitted by Sir Christopher Bellamy gave the Ministry of Justice recommendations that legal aid rates should be increased by 15%, and on top of that, that the legal aid rate should be reviewed upon a yearly basis. Now, it's the government's inaction or inability to implement the report's findings that have led the Criminal Bar Association, known as the CBA, to accuse ministers of dragging their feet over the implementation of recommendations, and it's this delay which has led the barristers to take the strike action we're seeing today. Now, we know that the courts already have a substantial backlog, partly due to COVID, partly due to a staffing crisis, but the most recent figures from Her Majesty's Court and Tribunal Services show there are more than 350,000 outstanding cases at the Magistrates' Court and more than 58,000 outstanding cases at the Crown Courts. So I wanted to speak to a QC who supported the protest, and I went and spoke with Simon Spence QC about the pandemic's impact on the court, the backlog, and why is there a staffing crisis in the criminal courts?
Backlog is currently 60,000 or thereabouts. It's in the high 50s. What people don't appreciate is that even before the courts closed, they weren't running to maximum capacity because of underinvestment. So there was already in the system a 30,000 backlog of cases. That has now doubled because of COVID, and also because, although the courts have reopened, they're still not operating at full capacity. Barristers are leaving the profession in droves because they're not able to make a decent living from the work they do. And they're finding alternative sources of employment, either different areas of law which are privately paid, or leaving the law altogether. And we're getting to a crucial point where there isn't sufficient manpower, either in terms of lawyers, judges and court staff. So even if you wanted to go back to full capacity, there aren't enough people to do it. And we think that's a major problem for the future.
Now, Mr. Spence's remarks were echoed by the CBA, who also said that because of the chronic underfunding, the system is seeing an alarming exodus of criminal barristers, and that the system is tilting on the brink of collapse. And it's in the light of the barristers' demands that the Government Justice Minister James Cartledge had negotiated a £7,000 pay increase for the barristers to be implemented as soon as September. But he also stated, "We encourage the Criminal Bar Association to work with us rather than escalate to unnecessary action, as it will only serve to harm victims as they are forced to wait longer for justice." So with no conclusion in sight, it seems that the barristers are going to be taking the fight from the courtroom to the picket line.
Oh, well, I've got a conclusion. Thanks, Ed. Thanks very much indeed. Here to discuss this with us is a former police superintendent, Leroy Logan, with this. And my conclusion is the system is broken. I mean, how you come back from, well, look in total, we're talking over 400,000 backlog cases in the courts. How you claw that back by simply saying, here's £5,000, now just get on with your job and work with us. Whew.
It seems to be a theme where the government thinks they'll throw some money at it and it miraculously is going to change overnight. It's like policing, you know, they eroded police numbers by 20,000 and then they'll throw money at it and then they think they're going to get these 20,000 back literally in 2-3 years, which it takes much longer than that. And that's the thing. All these backlogs are going to take years.
Yeah, and obviously at the heart of everything that takes place in justice is, you know, trying to redress a wrong, and there's a victim there. And when you've got delays, the victim suffers for a longer period of time. And when you're hearing about tinkering on the edge of collapse, really worrying situation where you think some people might not even bother to take cases, you know, to prosecution.
And that's the real problem, when you've got this whole thing about jurisprudence and what the law really stands for, and people, unfortunately, would think, well, there's no point reporting it. You know, if it applies to an insurance claim, they leave it at that, and then it sends the wrong signals to the perpetrators, the suspects, who think, well, actually, there's a good chance we'll get around this, and especially if they're waiting for months, possibly years, before the case is heard.
No, I get that in terms of the public, absolutely get that. But what in terms of professionals, you know, your former colleagues and whatever, when you're a police officer and you realise, what's the point prosecuting this? You must come across, you know, thinking like that.
Well, especially if, you know, you spend a long time compiling a case, you know, from the investigation and then, of course, submission to the Crown Prosecution Service. And, you know, officers in the case have to run with this case right up to Crown Court. And then at the end of it, sometimes the case is discontinued because the victim doesn't want to know anymore, or the fact that, you know, goes to the conclusion and it's a minimum sentence. You think it's devastating, demoralising. And I suppose we're seeing this right across the justice system because of austerity, and that's really eroded the infrastructure to such an extent now that you're thinking, well, actually, you've got these backlogs in every aspect of the justice system. And we see it in other public services, and it's a theme that's going right across the piece.
Yeah, I mean, I was looking at one of the papers this morning talking about people extracting their own teeth, because more and more dentists are just deciding to only work in private practice. And when people think of barristers, they think incredibly well paid. But the truth of it is that actually, at an hourly rate, a lot of these who offer legal aid are actually working below the minimum wage despite their high levels of training and education.
Yeah, and they're in a massive, massive debt going through all that training. And of course, then they're at the lower rung of the ladder and they have to build themselves up. So the glamour of, you know, the QC earning hundreds of pounds an hour is actually for a very small percentage.
But Leroy, what's more frightening to me is when you strip all this away and you look and you say, why aren't you paying that government? Well, the reason is, obviously, the government does not believe fully in the legal aid system.
I don't think they really understand the impact of austerity and the value, especially when it comes to reassuring people that we're in a safe, secure and positive environment. And they've got to understand that if you get a real imbalance right across the piece, they're going to see that public service is an essential piece of our infrastructure and, you know, giving law and order and peace and hopefully a quality of life.
Well, Dominic Raab, the Justice Secretary, has said we have proposed to increase investment in criminal legal aid by £135 million a year. That's the biggest increase in a decade, as recommended by an independent review. As Ed was saying in his report there, it sounds as though they're taking their row from the courtroom to the picket line.
Well, they seem to be having a fight on all fronts, and good luck to them.
Leroy, thank you very much indeed. Really appreciate that. Leroy Logan is a former police superintendent with the Met. Thank you very much indeed. But this argument, you know, where we destroy infrastructures, you will hear it with teaching, you will hear it in the NHS, the airports, you know, check-in people on the ground, cabin crew, whatever. They withdraw all the investment, all the recruitment, whatever, and then they all think, well, it's supposed to get back together like that.
Broken Britain. That's
and
what people say.
Broken Britain.
Broken Britain.
Do you think Britain is broken, folks, this morning? Let us know. And in what ways you think Britain is broken? I mean, times are bad. Have you ever known them to be worse?
I can't remember a time like it. I really can't.
Than they are. But then you're only 17. So how would you...
Well, what can I say?
How would you know everything I ask you?
Oh, don't bring this up again.
She doesn't know what a Steak Diane is. She doesn't know who Dick Emery is. She doesn't
But he
know
was
who
dead
Larry
before I was
Grayson
born,
is.
but I'm nearly 40. Move with the times. What can I say? We're going to take a
Seriously,
break.
you're really nearly 40?
Yes.
Oh, you've had a tough paper round, haven't you? Goodness me. Anyway, Biggins, back with him on the newspapers, and Emily Carver right after this. Won't he joke?
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We're trying to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Welcome back.
Yeah, I just think it's time to open up the newspapers and read them for you, basically, read the big stories in them. Doing that, the Conservative Home columnist, that is Emily Carver, and the actor, Mr. Christopher Biggins, who was regaling us with stories of when he used to act in the movie studios in Bray.
Yes.
What was the film then?
It was a jump to the left, a step to the right. It was Rocky Horror Picture
I love
Show.
that. Fantastic.
It was, and the studios are still there now. I think it's a luxury hotel on the. But it was a wonderful studio.
Is that Monkey Island? No.
I think it is.
Oh, right.
I think it is because you're.
Well, we're not.
You might. Yes. Anyway. Yeah.
Emily, moving swiftly on to the front of the Telegraph, Emily, because this is a bit of a hard one to get my head round. Nicola Sturgeon is basically claiming that she and Margaret Thatcher would have been on the same page when it comes to one particular policy. Tell us more.
Yes, about Scottish independence. Apparently, according to the Telegraph, Thatcher would back New Vote, says Sturgeon. But to be honest, I think it's a slightly misleading headline there, because actually you read into the article, and this is just based on Nicola Sturgeon's comments, that even previous Tory leaders, from Margaret Thatcher to Theresa May, said they believed the UK was based on the consent of the people who lived in its constituent nations. So I guess you can take from that they would be not opposed to having another vote for the Scottish people. But the article goes on to suggest that the government won't give in to demands for a vote, and of course they have to.
It does strike me strange, though, that every time Nicola Sturgeon gets a reply from the people who live in the constituent nations, and she doesn't like it, she just wants to go again until she gets the vote that she wants, the answer she wants.
You can apply that so broadly, can't you, to so many modern debates, Boris Johnson confidence votes, Brexit, whatever it might be.
Well, exactly. She just keeps on going. And you know what? There is a majority of people in Scotland who don't want another referendum vote. I think there are a lot of people who are staunch nationalists, of course there are, who are desperate to be independent from the UK. But on balance, I think the Scottish people are more concerned by real day-to-day issues, the NHS, crime, drug use, etc., inflation. Yeah. And I think a lot of people do believe that Nicola Sturgeon is using this as some kind of distraction from what's actually going on in Scotland.
I think it's also strange to think that, you know, without being independent, you can't be Scottish. I mean, I know so many people who are devoutly Scottish and are very aware and very proud of being Scottish, but they still are happy and they can apply. It's the same happens in Northern Ireland, probably the same happens in Wales, that they can still be part of the UK.
Yeah, I mean, I've just come back from Edinburgh, and I can assure you that the majority of people that I met in Edinburgh are absolutely so anti her. It's not true. They just don't want it.
Well, I'm half Scottish and I have a lot of family up there and they're unionists and they're sick and tired of Nicola Sturgeon.
Yeah.
She doesn't speak for them. And from my experience, the loudest voices in the SNP are quite bullying and quite obnoxious, actually, and can be very anti-English, which is kind of distasteful. It seems to be that nationalism that's accepted, whereas English nationalism certainly is not.
But I can't believe that Margaret Thatcher...
I know, it's a bit of a tenuous...
Yeah, I mean, that really is a tenuous link.
Yes,
but
very
Emily,
much so.
Emily, you said something there which I've always found to be the case. You said the loudest voices. You particularly mentioned the SNP there. But I've just found in politics all throughout my life, those who shout loudest are listened to most.
The squeaky wheel gets the
definitely.
oil.
Yeah.
I mean, we see that with just lobbying in general, with activism, etc., etc. They are listened to the most. I don't know how you get the quiet, more sensible voices out there. What do you think?
Okay.
It's just the state of politics, isn't it?
Solve the world, yeah.
If you scream and shout, although you do, if you scream and shout too much, then you do lose your credibility.
Christopher, let's talk about this fraud crisis in the front of the Mail.
Well, it's...
Britain's £3 billion fraud capital of the world.
I know. It is a frightening story, and it gets worse as you go into it, because, I mean, the Daily Mail have said that, you know, this year, £3 billion is going to be lost. And last year, I think the figure was considerably less, but still huge. And it's just, I check my balance almost daily with my bank because I'm, you know, so frightened that things could happen. Banks do reimburse customers, but that will have to stop, I would have thought, eventually, because they can't afford to keep giving. I mean, it just is terrifying. And the police...
well, they're not equipped to fight it, investigate it.
Exactly, that costs money.
Yeah.
And so it is a real problem, and I think it's a real problem for older people too. I think they're the area that people are targeting, you know, if they're going to.
A point. So I see in the news last week, I haven't got a chance to talk about this, you may have thought about this, but the Bank of England are getting rid, and the Treasury are getting rid of £20 notes and £50 notes. Does anybody know why?
Are they?
Well,
yes,
I guess
they
people
are.
just don't use notes anymore.
Well, you say that. I go and get my hair cut. My Turkish barber insists on cash and costs 17 quid, and I always give him a £20 note, and that's that.
Nail salons, same thing.
Nail salons. I went to a Chinese the other night and went inside to give him my card, and we don't take cards, so it's cash only. So this happened. I'm not saying, I mean, I think it's probably part of the Treasury saying we want everything digitally recorded so that we know that's going on. But a £20 note is a very common note, a denomination to use. And a £50 note, I mean, if you were paying for something big, I mean, you'd have a £50 note or whatever, you would use them less commonly, I suppose.
I mean, euros, you get 500
well,
euro
I was going to say,
notes,
Prince Charles knows all about that.
Well, I was going to say, you could
always
always go to Prince Charles for some cash, because he's got plenty in Clarence House.
Sorry, what's that? Sorry?
Prince Charles.
Yes.
Our next story.
He's got plenty in...
yes.
Because
just on that story, we've just been told apparently it's the paper ones they're phasing out.
Oh, right.
They're keeping the plastic ones.
OK.
But, you know, in Glastonbury Festival this weekend, they had a real problem because obviously they're trying to be cashless. And then the Wi-Fi collapsed, and no one could pay for any of the overpriced drinks or food for a short period. I'm told it was still a bit of a money spinner, but it's all very well and good not having cash anymore. But you have to assume you've got decent internet and infrastructure.
Also,
cash
privacy.
fabulous.
Privacy reasons, I think it's important. You should be able to, you know, buy something without your being tracked or whatever.
Well, I made a transaction in the bank in the last month. It was a small amount of money. But this guy phoned me and I thought it was fraud, the sort of stupid questions he was asking me. And he would say to me, and what exactly were you using that £100 for? I said, it's
none of your business.
So I thought, he said, I need to know, sir, I need to know whether this is fraud or not. I said, you don't need to know anything. You need to know I had £100 I transferred it to somebody end of story. But I mean, like, what is it? What are you using it for? What does the world come to when they need to know what exactly you were using it
Well,
for?
I think banks are losing a huge amount of money. And I think a lot of people, I know some friends of mine sued the bank and 3 bank managers from the Queen's Bank went to prison because of fraud. And they then sued the bank and won. But I think that they're really anxious now, banks, about losing money.
Speaking of the Queen's Bank Coots, of course, let's talk about this probe that the Sunday Times did into Prince Charles, which alleges, and it hasn't been denied, that there was this suitcase full of euros from a Qatari prince to Prince Charles. Nothing illegal about that. It was for his charitable foundation. There is now a review by the Charity Commission, but there are questions about judgment.
Well, I think, you know, when you are the future King of England, to receive a bag full of cash is not a good idea. I mean, you know, I think he should have said, actually, I wouldn't mind a credit card or a cheque. I mean, cash, even though he's going to put it into the bank, into the Queen's Bank Coots, it's still...
It just looks a bit dodgy, doesn't it?
I think it does look a bit dodgy.
Well, when you start to hear about suitcases full of cash...
Yes.
I mean, it just instantly doesn't sound very becoming of the future King of England.
No, it's
not very becoming. No, not very becoming.
It's my idea of heaven, but I mean,
mine too. But you know, we're not going to be the monarch.
What would you do, as a matter of interest, if you found? I know you don't go on the bus that much, but if you
I do actually.
do you?
Yeah, I do use the
If
bus.
you found a bag on the bus and it had €1 million in it, what would you do?
Oh gosh, that's a dilemma.
Yeah, I would hand it in. And they'll tell you the reason I would hand it in straight away, even if you did think, oh, I wonder would they miss this. You think these notes must be marked.
It's a trap.
It's a trap.
You'd be a target.
Some way. Yeah. So I mean, you know, if you found 30 quid, 40 quid in a purse or something, I think you would take great satisfaction in handing that.
Oh yes, yes.
That would mean something, but a huge amount like that means dodginess.
Yeah,
to
it
me.
does. It means something criminal going on.
Or the drugs cartel to whom it belonged to would come after you or whatever.
Well, that's the thing. Who needs money in cash? It's drug cartels, it's criminals, and... I don't know, just dodgy people. Sex traffickers.
So do we think Prince Charles...
Barbers.
And princes.
Do we think
Nail bars.
Do you think Prince Charles thought that when he received that money? No.
I don't know what he thought, actually. I really don't know what he thought. Is he so out of touch that he wouldn't think that... You know, where's this guy? I mean, when Saddam Hussein fled Iraq and whatever, it was cash that he would send to African nations and whatever to be there ahead of him to set up, you know, a base for a possible base. And all these tyrants deal in cash. It's stolen or it's extrapolated in awful ways and then placed somewhere else. But it's always done in cash, so it cannot be tracked.
Well, didn't they find out that one of those, you know, those shops on Oxford Street that sells basically rubbish, tat? I think they did finally find out that one of those is actually a secret business for some kind
money
of
laundering.
Money laundering, yes.
Yeah, for doing all that. Okay. So Prince Charles, what advice, Emily, would you hand him on this one? Don't take cash anymore? Or, I mean, the Queen doesn't do it. Prince Philip didn't do it.
Well, yes, I think that would be the basic advice. Try to look above board all the time.
Dentists, the true horror of NHS dentist crisis revealed in the Mirror.
I mean, it really is. Every day there's a negative NHS story, isn't there, really? And this time it's the dentist. A couple of weeks ago, there was a story, or a couple of months ago, there was a story about how you could not, as a new patient in Somerset, the whole of Somerset, find a dentist to, you know, sign on to. So this is another story about how there's a massive shortage in NHS dentists. A lot of them are going private because they can make more money, of course, and that people are now taking drastic measures, pulling out their own teeth.
I mean,
it's
can't
dystopian.
imagine. Yeah, I mean, every horror movie you conjure.
Well, it's Victorian times, isn't it? That's what they used to do in Victorian times, pull their own teeth out.
I'm going to the dentist today.
Really?
But anything in particular?
Godspeed.
Lots of things, but, you know, I had, at the start of the year, I had a wisdom tooth which needed to be pulled out, right? So that's for all well and good. But now they talk about, well, we could implant a new one back in it.
Oh, I wouldn't bother.
I wouldn't. I'm thinking not bother, because it involves drilling into your bone, jaw things.
I've got a gap there.
Yeah?
And it's fine.
That's fine.
Yeah.
If you don't need it, then don't get it.
Who can see it, Emily? That's what I say. Who can see
Who
it?
can see it? But there's one stat in here that is quite shocking. NHS appointments in England are down from 3.5 million a month pre-pandemic to just 2.3 million a month now. That is quite a shocking stat. That's what, a third less?
Okay, guys, got to leave it there. Got to see you again in about 40, 45 minutes' time. So thank you, Emily and Christopher. Ghislaine Maxwell's been placed on suicide watch in prison in Brooklyn, in America. She'll find out today if her sentencing, which is scheduled to take place tomorrow, will be postponed because of that decision.
Well, joining us now for more is the lawyer Lisa Bloom, who's represented victims of Jeffrey Epstein. A very good morning to you. Of course, the victims will be very much hoping that that sentencing will take place tomorrow. What do you think the chances are of that happening?
Yes, my clients have been waiting a long time to see justice, and we feel like we're very close right now. And it's very disappointing to see Ghislaine Maxwell want to put that off. I don't think the judge is going to buy it. I think the judge is going to say that the sentencing will happen tomorrow because we need to move this forward.
What does it do to the victims, Lisa, who hear yet of another delay? It marches them to the top of the hill, and then they must feel as if they're going to be marched down again. That must be very just undermining for them.
You're right, and it is exhausting and it is dispiriting, but they also know that this is going to happen. And I tell my clients that even if the sentencing gets put off, it will probably be only for a few days, maybe for a week. Ultimately, it's going to happen. I think Ghislaine Maxwell knows she's going to spend the rest of her life in prison. She's going to probably get a very significant sentence. The prosecution is asking for 30 years. She's 61 years old, I think, so she's probably going to spend the rest of her days behind bars.
How would you describe her, Lisa? For people who, may think that she is an innocent caught up in the maelstrom of all of this, that Epstein pulled all the strings, what's your view of the woman?
Well, it's not just my view, it's what the jury said. The jury said that she is responsible for the choices that she made. And those choices were sex trafficking underage girls to Jeffrey Epstein, who's one of the most prolific predators of our time. She personally was involved in sexually abusing some of them, and she made their lives a living hell. And they have to spend the rest of their lives with the fallout of the choices that she made, that they were trafficked to this man, they were sexually abused when they were underage, and it's just been devastating to them.
There's been lots of speculation since the end of the trial that she may enter into some sort of plea bargaining to try and reduce her sentence. Is there much suggestion that she might, perhaps produce some names to try and reduce the amount of time that she spends behind bars, or has she been uncooperative in that respect?
Yes, many people have speculated about that, but there doesn't seem to be any sign of it. I don't think the government wants to make any kind of deal with her. They got their conviction. It was a hard-fought trial. She had outstanding attorneys who made every point they could on her behalf, and the jury rejected all of that and convicted her. And now she's looking at a very significant sentence. So why should the state want to make any kind of a deal with her? I just don't see that happening.
Yeah. But Lisa, what happens to the victims that you are representing now? Can you give us an insight into their lives, how empowered they feel with what's going on, how they're rebuilding, if they are rebuilding their lives?
Well, they are, because we fought for and won very significant financial settlements with Jeffrey Epstein's estate, and I'm pleased that we were able to get that for all 8 of my clients. And they take that money to use for therapy, for medical expenses, to go back to school, to start a new life. So it really makes a big difference for them, and they are moving forward with their lives. But this prosecution of Ghislaine Maxwell has meant a lot to them. It meant that they have been heard, that this matter wasn't just swept under the rug after Jeffrey Epstein took his own life in prison a couple of years ago. And it just means a lot to see accountability against Ghislaine Maxwell.
Well, of course, that will be why, of course, everyone will be so jittery about Ghislaine Maxwell's mental health, given that Jeffrey Epstein took his own life and was never able to go before the court. But with any luck, that sentencing will happen tomorrow. Lisa Bloom, always a pleasure to talk to you. Thanks very much for joining us at such an early hour over here.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa Bloom there. She's the lawyer for a lot of those Epstein victims. There are 8 of them, as you said then. She's a founder of the law firm Bloom. Well,
Well, we're going to take a break, take a look at the weather, and after that we'll be back discussing what's on the G7 agenda today. Plus, we'll be live from the Wimbledon queue. Might you be in there today heading to Wimbledon? Let us know. Fans there battling for a seat on centre court. Looking ahead to today's weather, and the UK is looking rather unsettled for a time, with showery conditions gradually spreading eastwards. Let's take a look at the details. So, by the middle of the day, the worst of the showers should be clearing from southwest England to leave most parts dry with some sunny spells. However, temperatures will be disappointing for late June. Meanwhile, showers will be breaking out more widely across the southeast, and here a few of them could turn heavy with a chance of some thunder. Across Wales, 1 or 2 light showers are likely, but drier and brighter weather will gradually be spreading in across the country from the west. A few heavy and possibly thundery showers will affect the East Midlands, whilst across Birmingham and other more western areas the showers will start to ease, with more in the way of sunshine developing. Across northeast England, a mix of bright spells and scattered locally heavy and perhaps thundery downpours are on the cards, with temperatures close to 20 degrees in the sunniest spots. Edinburgh and other eastern parts of mainland Scotland could also catch some hefty showers around noon, but across the rest of Scotland the showers should be less heavy and fewer in number. The middle of the day doesn't look too bad for Northern Ireland though, as here any showers will be very isolated, with most parts staying dry and at times quite bright. Heavy showers then will ease across eastern parts to leave a mostly fine end to the day, although rain will arrive across Northern Ireland later. And that's how your weather is shaping up for the rest of your Monday.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
The Prime Minister urges world leaders to stand firm against Russia during a crucial G7 summit.
Good morning, viewers and listeners. 7 o'clock is the time. It is a Monday morning, the 27th of June. You're tuned into Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn, Holmes and Isabel, Webster. Thanks for your company.
Here's what's leading the news this morning. The Prime Minister will address world leaders at the G7 summit today, where he's expected to ask them to take urgent action to end Putin's grip on global food prices. It comes as he agrees a new military surge in Ukraine with the French President, Emmanuel Macron.
Missiles have struck Kyiv for the first time in 3 weeks. The city's mayor called the attacks an attempt to intimidate Ukraine ahead of a speech by President Zelensky to the G7 today.
A gas explosion in Birmingham that destroyed a house and badly damaged 3 others has left a man with life-threatening injuries. 4 other men suffered more minor injuries but were discharged by paramedics.
We'll have an update from the scene very shortly. And Wimbledon gets underway today. Full capacity crowds, that's about 40,000 people a day for the first time since the start of the pandemic. Emma Raducanu and Sir Andy Murray will be on centre court on day 1.
And as ever, you can join in any of our discussions by emailing gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet us at gbnews. Indeed, lots of you have been sending pictures of your cars to us as we've been asking what the colour of your car says about you.
Yes, yes. And did you ever get a colour that you couldn't sell on, basically, as well, and one that is very, very attractive? So we'll have those pictures, I am assured. Am I not, Mr. Producer? He says we'll have them at 15:15, I'm being promised now. We'll have those pictures. We can have a little car show.
Oh, a little car show. Oh, and also, I'm really excited about this. We're on the lookout for a GB News People's Champion. We want to celebrate someone in your community, someone who deserves a little bit of a shout out, someone who goes above and beyond, whatever that might be. Get in touch, nominate them.
So you can email us with the subject Breakfast People's Champion, and then put all the details on that, why he or she should be the person nominated for that, and we will do our best to draw attention to them.
So our top story this morning, and the Prime Minister is to address Western leaders today at the G7 summit in Bavaria in Germany. He's expected to urge them to end Putin's stranglehold on food prices and to stand strong in the face of Russian aggression.
It comes after the Prime Minister held talks with the French President, where they agreed on a renewed surge in military support for Ukraine.
Well, for more on all of this, we can go to our reporter, Paul Hawkins, who's in the Bavarian Alps for us this morning. A very good morning to you, Paul. Another busy day ahead for the G7 leaders. Just walk us through what the highlights are likely to be.
The highlight today, Isabel, is going to be Volodymyr Zelensky addressing the G7, effectively, very simply, calling for more weapons, calling for more money and more support from the G7 leaders when it comes to fighting the war against Russia. Now, the interesting thing is that yesterday we had Emmanuel Macron sipping Bavarian whiskey with Boris Johnson. They were kind of arms around each other, agreeing to stay unified. And the message from Boris Johnson was very much, look, we need to stay the course on this. We need to keep funding, keep backing Ukraine in this, because there are some voices in France, also in Germany as well, that are saying, look, how much longer can we keep supporting Ukraine in this war for? We don't know when it's going to end, and the longer we continue to support them, obviously the conflict continues, and then the conflict being one of the factors that's pushing up inflation around the world. And so how much longer can we carry on doing this, considering economically it is harming a lot of people around the world? And that is something that Boris Johnson will also mention when he talks to the leaders today, which is how they can secure grain, because before the war Ukraine provided 10% of the world's grain, and since then we've had blockades by Russia around the main ports such as Odessa, which have reduced grain supplies and helped to push up inflation when it comes to food. So Boris Johnson today will talk about how to secure grain supplies, how to get food supplies back up, and of course we'll hear from Volodymyr Zelensky, who's saying that partners need to be partners and not observers when it comes to supporting Ukraine.
Thank you very much indeed. So back in Britain, Boris Johnson claims that he's thinking about a third term as Prime Minister. Now, we're going to be talking about this shortly to a pollster, actually, what you guys are thinking out there as regards all of that. But in the meantime, we're going to go to Cheshire. We're going to go to Linda Finlow, who is a GB News listener and viewer on that one. Linda, we say good morning to you.
Good morning.
Good morning. Very lovely to see you, Linda. We're going to get the professional pollster analysing the views out there in the land. But first of all, Linda, your take. Boris Johnson, he says he's thinking about running for a third term. Would he have your vote, and why, Linda?
Yes, absolutely he would do. I love the way Boris winds up the mainstream media and all the lefties It's an off-the-cuff remark, but obviously I think he could do it, and I would vote for him.
What about some of the things
It's
that
not
have
just the
upset his
lefties,
own
we should
party?
say, yeah,
well,
that
this
he-
is
that
what
he
I wanted
winds
to...
up-
Yeah. Go
Yeah.
on.
Sorry, I missed that.
We were just saying that he doesn't just wind up the left, does he, Linda, though? I mean, it's his own party. He had 40% of his own MPs voting against him. And, of course, we've just seen a member of his cabinet quitting in the last few days, and these terrible by-election results, the worst in political history.
Yes. Yeah, they were terrible. And I think they must have been a great disappointment. But, you know, there's another story there. And the story is that Labour lost its deposit in Tiverton. They got something like 3.7% of the vote. So I don't think that Keir Starmer needs to be measuring the curtains at number 10 just yet. I know he thinks it's a great victory, winning Wakefield back. But there doesn't seem to me to be any appetite for a Labour government or a Liberal government, because the Liberals also lost their deposit in Wakefield.
Right. Well, Linda, what we're going to do now is we're going to bring in to have a conversation with you, and you can have one with him. This is a man called Chris Curtis, and Chris is the head of political polling at Opinium Research. And Linda makes the very good point there, Chris. There doesn't seem to be an appetite for a Boris Johnson alternative. What are you gauging?
Yeah, I mean, I think there is a fair point in that. It is certainly true, as we were talking about earlier this morning, that Boris Johnson's popularity has declined quite dramatically over the last few months. However, it's also true that that hasn't been mirrored by a similar increase in support for the Labour Party and support for Keir Starmer. So if, for example, you ask, who do you think would make the best Prime Minister? We've seen a pretty dramatic fall in Boris Johnson's score on that question, but we haven't seen a similar increase in Keir Starmer's score. Now, you know, in terms of how that's playing out at the moment, in terms of the sort of national opinion polls we're seeing, that would still be enough to probably lose the Conservatives a majority, which would mean a Labour government. But Labour still has a lot of work to do if they want to convince people that they're ready to govern after the next
I just
election.
want to ask Linda, and we'll come back to you, Chris, for your take on this. I mean, Linda, you talk about how one of the things you love about Boris is his ability to wind people up. He doesn't really care whether it's the left or perhaps some of his detractors from within his own party. Do you also really admire him when he's out on the world stage? Because that seems to be real safe ground for the Prime Minister.
Yes, I think he comes across very well. People like him, and that's half the battle. He's done marvellously with the Ukraine and Brexit and that sort of thing. He can talk to anybody. I think if you're thinking of a man of the people, it's not Keir Starmer, it's Boris Johnson.
All right, how interesting.
So you would think you have a lot in common with a posh old Etonian there, Linda. You think he's right up your street, and that you and he would have a lot in common?
Well, I've met Boris on at least 4 occasions, and he's wonderful to speak to. He's just so natural, and, you know, it doesn't come across as I'm an old Etonian and you're not. He really is terrific to speak to, and he's the sort of person you could take to the pub, have a pint with. I don't drink, but you know, you could take.
But
him
you
to
would
the
in
pub
his case.
and you could have a drink with him.
Chris, Linda makes a great point, and this is what was the great strength of Boris Johnson, wasn't it, initially? This breakthrough aspect of him. He is a celebrity, the way Donald Trump was a celebrity. It's not that people are really looking at their political stance first and foremost. They're just intoxicated by his personality.
Well, yeah, there was 2 things in that 2019 general election. Firstly, is kind of what you're getting at there. He was also seen as a bit of a different type of Conservative leader. So yes, okay, he was an old Etonian, and he'd lived a very Conservative Party lifestyle, just like prime ministers before him. But he didn't come across like that to the public. That was the first important thing. But the second thing back in that 2019 general election was that he was seen as the kind of man who could get things done. You know, we heard that's the slogan, get Brexit done. We even saw that last year with the vaccine rollout, which is one of the reasons he did so well in those local elections last year, because he was getting the vaccine rollout done. The problem now, and the reason we pollsters are seeing our numbers change, is because the public don't see him as the kind of person who gets things done anymore. And when they're seeing their prices rising in the shops, when they're not seeing their wages go up by very much, definitely not as quickly as their energy bills.
But I think Linda's point is, tell me who would get things done. You're just not enamoured. You don't see anybody on the political front, Linda, who's got Boris Johnson's charisma or personality. That's what you're saying as well, isn't it?
Sorry, Eamonn, I'm having difficulty hearing you.
Yes.
Can you repeat that?
I'm just saying that you are saying that on the political front, whatever the party, the Lib Dems, Labour, Conservatives, if it wasn't Boris Johnson, you're thinking no one else has his personality, his charisma, his charm, his star quality, if you like.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. It's one thing being in power and being in Westminster and being remote. It's another thing to be very, I'm not sure what you'd call it, very hail fellow, well met. He will talk to anyone, to anybody. He's unfailingly polite and courteous. He's charming. You may or may not agree with his politics. I do. I think he's great. And I think it's all right being very politically minded, but you have to have the personality to go with it. I think he's got that.
OK, well, Linda Finlow, certainly a big fan of Boris Johnson. Really good to get your views. And I think certainly when it comes to our viewers and listeners, you're definitely not in a minority there. And Chris Curtis, a final thought from you. I mean, we were talking a little bit earlier in the programme about this hardcore of supporters that there are for Boris Johnson, but they are diminishing.
They are, but I think one of the reasons we talked earlier about the fact that many Conservative MPs are, not necessarily moving against the Prime Minister, despite the fact that lots of voters are. And one of the reasons for that, I think, is because they have to care about the Conservative Party membership. Ultimately, it's the Conservative Party membership who will choose the next leader of the Conservative Party. And at the moment, all of the polling of Conservative Party members shows that they're still on Boris Johnson's side.
Interesting.
Chris, appreciate it. Thank you. But most of all, Linda Finlow, thank you very much for speaking to us and being there as a GB News viewer and listener. Linda, where are you in Cheshire? I hate when people do this and they say Cheshire as if it was like Ulster or Scotland.
The cost of living crisis, I think we'll win the next election.
Right. And where are you? Where are you talking to us from today?
Wilmslow.
Oh, beautiful part of the world. Thank you very much indeed. Lovely, lovely, very much. Linda Finlow there from Wilmslow. Thank you. 14 minutes past 7 o'clock. If you want to get in touch with us, you know how to get us. It's gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet at gbnews.
Let's bring you up to date on the latest headlines this hour. And Russia has launched a series of deadly missile strikes in the Ukrainian capital for the first time in weeks. A number of people were trapped underneath fallen rubble and pulled to safety after Moscow forces hit homes and a kindergarten near Kyiv. The attacks have left at least one person dead and 6 others injured.
The Justice Secretary says the barrister strikes starting today are regrettable and will only be a delay for justice for the victims. Dominic Raab says the strikes are part of a dispute over legal aid funding, with barristers also refusing to accept new cases or step in for colleagues whose cases are overrunning.
Prince Charles has followed in his father's footsteps in becoming patron of the Royal College of Surgeons of Edinburgh. It comes a day after the Sunday Times reported that the Prince of Wales had accepted cash donations totalling €3 million from a former Qatari Prime Minister.
Very much indeed for sending us pictures of your cars today. We were doing this survey about what the colour of your car says about you. And the first photograph is from Julie. Julie, good morning to you. Julie says, hi, Eamonn and Isabel. This is the car we bought for our son's 17th birthday. So I think that's a little Renault there, isn't it? Oh, no, it's not. It's a 2-litre diesel Citroen C2.
It's cute.
So there, and we don't know what exactly how you would describe that colour. But it's probably a well, it's different.
What would you call
it's different.
that? I'd call that a yellow. I'd call that
it looks like lime green to me, isn't it?
What's the yellow? Primrose. Primrose yellow. There you go.
Okay, you say so.
Anyway, this is from Ralph. He's rocking a bright red Jaguar convertible 2-seater sports car.
Very
now
nice.
You're talking. That looks very nice.
Very
Actually,
nice.
I'm more drawn to the cream leather trim than anything else there.
That's called ivory.
Ivory,
and,
soz.
and what it is it's a beautiful contrast to metallic blue or British racing green or that sort of red there that you've got.
I should tell you what red means. Go on, finish your point.
I was just going to say the interior leather trimming is so important to the overall look of a car. I mean, if that was something like mustard or brown or whatever, it would look absolutely horrible looking, but that's a beaut.
Well,
absolutely.
those who are behind the wheel of a red motor love to live life in the fast lane and are always the centre of attention.
Of our room. Finally, this is Sean. Now we're talking, this is the colour of your dress today, Isabel. Vibrant yellow we've got there.
So many more pictures coming in, too many to list really, but it is a bit of fun. What does your car colour tell you about you? Mine's black. What does that mean? I'm a bit dull and safe?
No, I'm sure it doesn't, Isabel. I'm sure it means you could be a good undertaker or something. I don't know what it is, but I'm trying to see.
Oh, I've heard it all now. I didn't know where we were going with that, but I'll take undertaker. Yeah, it's probably a compliment.
Well, black says strength and security, doesn't it? I mean, it's like all the security cars for heads of state. They're all black. You don't get those yellow or green.
But honestly, I don't think I would ever deviate from a silver or a black.
You don't think you could never see it?
I mean, I had a white car, but that was just because it was...
But do you never walk into a showroom and are just taken? Just think, wow. No?
I don't think I've ever walked into a car showroom.
Do you not?
No.
One of the great joys in life.
Yeah, maybe. I've only ever bought second-hand bangers.
Well, you can have a second-hand showroom.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah. No.
OK. A fortnight of tennis beckons as Wimbledon 2022 starts today.
It's going to be the first proper return to capacity for the first time in 3 years with all of the COVID restrictions that have been in place.
So what can we expect from this year's championships? And most importantly, how are the British hopefuls looking?
Well, joining us now is our reporter, Ellie Costello. Ellie, you're out with lots of hopefuls in the queue to try and get in. Always a good atmosphere in a queue for Wimbledon. What's it like this morning? Sun is shining, I see.
Yes, good morning to you both. It is absolutely buzzing here on Wimbledon Common. It's 7 o'clock in the morning, but look how many people have arrived. The queue goes all the way down to the back of Wimbledon Common down there. Hundreds of people hoping to buy a ticket once the stands open at 9:45 this morning. Look at what everyone is being given. This is a guide to queuing. This is what everyone's being handed in the queue. Very, very British. Everyone hoping to get in and see the action. The first time it's back to full capacity for 3 years. It was obviously cancelled due to the coronavirus pandemic in 2020. Last year it was at about 50% capacity. This year we're back to full action and people are very, very excited. You can see some people have even been camping overnight hoping to get tickets. And I wanted to introduce you to a tennis super fan. This is Danny. Danny, good morning to you. I'm going to stand here to try and shield your eyes. And you've been here a very long time, haven't you?
Yeah, good morning. I've arrived here Friday night and I'm standing here since Saturday morning. So, yeah, it's a very tough experience, but the best experience in the world for me.
A tough experience, he says, in his camping chair, in the sunshine, on Wimbledon Common. It's not too bad, is it? I think you're enjoying yourself, really.
Yeah. This most important thing for me is stay here in the queue to have a ticket to go inside of the center court, because for me and for my gang that is here, that we live for the tennis, this is the best tournament in the world, so we are so exciting.
So you got here on Friday and you're not going to go in until tomorrow. So Danny isn't even going to try and get a ticket today. You're here for tomorrow, right? So how many days is that? 3 days camping?
3 days camping, 3 full day camping. So, but we can stay here. There are the tennis court there to play. We have our rackets. So we have a lot of fun during the queue, during these 3 days.
And you are a tennis super fan, aren't you? Show us your T-shirt, because you are actually a tennis player yourself back home in Italy, aren't you?
Yeah. I'm not a very important tennis player, but look there, this is our logo of our academy in Naples, Italy. So yeah, I spend 3 or 4 hours of my free time to play tennis in the week.
You live and breathe tennis, and Wimbledon is one of the highlights of the year, isn't it? And I wanted to share your tattoo with the world. Up you pop. You're going to show us your tattoo now. This just shows what a superfan you are. Who's this?
this is Roger Federer. But for me, I say always, I have a portrait of Roger Federer, but I don't have a portrait of my wife. So it means that it's more important than my wife.
And who are you most looking forward to seeing tomorrow?
So?
Who are you most looking forward to seeing tomorrow?
For sure. So we are so disappointed that Federer doesn't play, but tomorrow we need to watch Rafa Nadal match and Matteo Berrettini match.
Well, Danny, I hope you have a wonderful time tomorrow. I hope you get really good seats. You've been here for 3 days. You do deserve it. And enjoy the sunshine. You've got a great spot here. Well, lots of people are going to be hoping for really good seats on centre court by being in the queue. Some people are not allowed into the Wimbledon Championships this year, though. That includes Russian and Belarusian players. The All England tennis champions, they said they will not be playing this year after Russia invaded Ukraine. That has been a little bit controversial. But keep an eye out on the Brits as well, because Emma Raducanu will be on centre court today, as will Andy Murray. And Serena Williams as well later on in the week. She's got the wild card to be at Wimbledon. She hasn't won anything since 2017, so let's keep an eye out on her as well. Lots to look forward to.
Brilliant. The weather is so fine, so beautiful, Ellie. So
got my fingers crossed for Emma. I have.
Well, yeah, you'd need to. But Ellie, I presume the good weather is contagious with the people queuing. It must make them feel, really they want to look forward to what's ahead.
Absolutely. I think Wimbledon does rely on the weather, doesn't it? I have actually camped here overnight myself before when it has been chucking it down. And let me tell you, yeah, you wouldn't believe it, Izzy, but I have done this. And in the rain, it is quite depressing. It is really fun, yeah. You need to bring your sparkling wine and your Pimm's, though. You have to start early, especially if it's raining. But today, it's sunny and everyone's having the best time. Look, everyone's moving their tents up in the queue. Lots going on here and everyone's so excited.
I love that about you, Ellie. Not afraid to get stuck in. Good for you. Do you know I worked at Wimbledon
Full of surprises, Izzy.
No, I know, yeah.
Thanks, Ellie.
Thanks, Ellie.
So what did you do? Did you sell ice cream, strawberries?
I worked in the debentures department, but it was just a complete luck of the draw.
Office job?
No, like serving people and as a waitress. But essentially, you finished uni and pretty much everyone packed up from the campus and went and worked at Wimbledon, because obviously you finished term by this time in the calendar. And it was great fun. You'd get in there early before any of the public were there, and you'd be walking underneath centre court and you'd be issued your uniform and walking around all these, and you'd see all the players. And sometimes at the end of the day, if you finished your shift, you could go and hang around and people would be leaving and you could hop into centre court.
Do you know, you said a very interesting thing there, that basically folk are working away at university and whatever, and then they go en masse to Wimbledon and it all sorts itself out. Why can't we do that at the airports, for instance? Why can't we do that?
Working.
So many, the hospitality industry in general, everything else seems to be a problem, yet Wimbledon runs with military precision, because there's a lot of military around there making things happen. But it is an absolute credit to Britain, I think, Wimbledon, and it really is something they can be proud of, except for the Russian and Belarusian players playing under different flags, I think is not right.
Wimbledon Village is also just so lovely. So also, once you finish your shift, everyone would spill out into the streets. It's a lovely pub, the Rose and Crown on the High Street there, and the atmosphere during Wimbledon fortnight is just electric. If you get a chance, if you don't get to go to watch the tennis, just go and hang out
around
in
the village.
It's lovely.
My optician's is in Wimbledon Village.
Very nice.
Yes.
Well, don't go there in the next fortnight. It'll be gridlock.
That's exactly what. Stay well away from that one. We're going to take a break there, and we're staying with sport and getting all the latest from Paul Coit right after this. That's to come after the weather.
Looking ahead to today's weather, and the UK is looking rather unsettled for a time, with showery conditions gradually spreading eastwards. Let's take a look at the details. So, by the middle of the day, the worst of the showers should be clearing from southwest England to leave most parts dry with some sunny spells. However, temperatures will be disappointing for late June. Meanwhile, showers will be breaking out more widely across the southeast, and here a few of them could turn heavy with a chance of some thunder. Across Wales, 1 or 2 light showers are likely, but drier and brighter weather will gradually be spreading in across the country from the west. A few heavy and possibly thundery showers will affect the East Midlands, whilst across Birmingham and other more western areas the showers will start to ease, with more in the way of sunshine developing. Across northeast England, a mix of bright spells and scattered locally heavy and perhaps thundery downpours are on the cards, with temperatures close to 20 degrees in the sunniest spots. Edinburgh and other eastern parts of mainland Scotland could also catch some hefty showers around noon, but across the rest of Scotland the showers should be less heavy and fewer in number. The middle of the day doesn't look too bad for Northern Ireland though, as here any showers will be very isolated, with most parts staying dry and at times quite bright. Heavy showers then will ease across eastern parts to leave a mostly fine end to the day, although rain will arrive across Northern Ireland later. And that's how your weather is shaping up for the rest of your Monday.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
With the time at 7:28, with a little promo of what's still to come in our programme this morning. And as MPs prepare to vote on plans to ditch parts of the Northern Ireland Protocol, we'll be speaking to the Shadow Secretary for Northern Ireland. That's Peter Kyle. He joins us in around 15 minutes' time.
Also today, it's still on the front page. This morning we're going to be discussing the calls to investigate the alleged bag of cash. We're talking a big bag. We're talking not 100,000, not 500,000, not 750,000. We are talking...
Well, 3 million was the total, but around 1 million was stuffed into Portland and
Per
mixed in
bag.
suitcases,
Per
apparently.
bag. That's basically what you want. To Prince Charles by a former Qatari Prime Minister, OK? Ingrid Seward, the royal commentator on that one at 8:45.
And you can join in any of our discussions. Email us gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet us at gbnews.
Look at the headlines making the back pages this morning. We begin with the Express. It leads on Wimbledon as Emma Raducanu gets ready to step onto the centre court there. Centre stage, they say. Meanwhile, the Daily Mail praises England's cricket captain Joe Root after his stunning batting helped his side close in on victory in the third test. That's against New Zealand. Finally, Daily Star, Cristiano Ronaldo's transfer saga. Is it on? Is it off? It's believed the Manchester United star... well, there's just a lot of speculation if he would leave the club, but the headline you've got there refers to he snubbed David Beckham with his Inter Miami outfit in favour of staying at Manchester United. Well, that must have been a big decision. Not. No, hold on. Inter, what are they called? Inter Miami or Manchester United, like as if...
That look in your eye, though, that said to me that you know something.
No,
is that right?
No, he's going to stay. Of course he's going to stay.
OK, fine.
Of course he's going to stay. Anyway, what have we got here? You want to begin with what?
Well, I thought we should start with Wimbledon.
Right.
Let's talk about Emma Raducanu then, because she's had this strain and she pulled out of a competition last week. Yet she's been rallying, preparing. Looks like she's going to appear at Wimbledon. Is it going to be a strong...
When you say rallying, you mean rallying, or I see what you did, and I thought it was excellent. Yeah. It's well, funny. It's with Andy Murray as well. They both seem to have. I was going to say, like Eamonn probably had last season. It's a bad side as far as Manchester United. That was a cheap Manchester United joke.
Cheap.
I apologise. There was no need for it, was there?
No need for it.
I apologise.
No need for it.
But Wimbledon, as far as their injuries go, abdominal injury for Andy Murray, Emma Raducanu. That's the thing. She's picked up so many injuries, and I'm worried for her. I'm excited for her at Wimbledon. I don't know how the pressure is going to be completely different to how it was this time last year when she got to the fourth round. And, of course, she was completely overwhelmed because so much attention was paid to her and she wasn't expected to do anything. Now, 9 months ago, she wins the US Open, hasn't had much success after that. So what's the expectation now?
Well, maybe that will play in her favour. Perhaps the expectation will be a little bit lower than it was straight after Flushing Meadows. But equally, maybe the support of the home crowd at Wimbledon could carry her all the way
or
to
put
the
big
final.
pressure on her.
Yeah, she's a bit older, you know. I mean, it seems as though
6 months older.
It's her physical health rather than her mental health that has recently been plaguing her more.
Yeah, exactly right. I think when we talk about the pressure, I think honestly that the crowd will help her now. I think she's been through that and she knows what the form is. She's been through a year now of playing at the highest level.
We're going to find out what she is made of physically or mentally after this tournament.
And also, it's almost like she's done it the wrong way round, whereas you'd have young tennis players would get better and better, and then they would head towards a championship after about 3 or 4 years maybe of playing at the highest level. She's gone in and done it straight away. So it's kind of like a reverse that most people would do. So now she's got to get back to where she would have been and then making that journey along. I think it's going to suit her playing at Wimbledon this year, just as long as she stays physically fit.
The main thing is, whatever happens to her, win, lose or draw, she enjoys it. I hope she enjoys it and has a good Wimbledon.
And she's a superstar. You know, her face is everywhere, wherever you go over Wimbledon.
Yeah.
And it's also, the other thing is that, you know, we saw Ellie in the huge queue, which there always is, and they're given their pieces of paper that says exactly where you are in the queue. The other queue, which I always remember, is that everybody, I don't know whether this still happens, that everybody would suddenly start wearing white and playing at the local local courts.
That does still happen.
And all of a sudden they go in and buy brand new tennis rackets. It still goes on, does it?
Yeah, definitely. It inspires a whole new generation, Wimbledon. Absolutely.
But only for 2 weeks, and then they give up after.
That's the only time we have good weather
true.
in this country.
I remember doing that. Gosh, everybody wants to be a tennis player.
Doing the grunt as you served.
No, there's no grunting.
Oh, you're a silent server.
No.
Silent server, okay.
Look, there's a couple of things. You want to talk a bit about cricket, then I want to talk about transfer news. We haven't got much time. OK, I'll be as quick as I can. Cricket's looking very good. 183 for 2. England chasing 296. It's been a revelation since Brendan McCullum's come in and Ben Stokes has taken over the captaincy of England. Things were in the doldrums. We were playing really badly. And now we've got Joe Root, who is no longer the captain. He's just playing with his freedom. Had this reverse sweep that he hit for 6 yesterday. I mean, this is a team that's going out and it's almost like an exhibition match. They're just going out and enjoying themselves and it's working. And I just wonder whether any other sports like football or maybe rugby could take a leaf out of their book and look at it and think this freedom is the way to go because it's working, it's successful, and 118 expected. Well, we need to score this morning, which should be done, which would be against the World Test champions, 3-0, which would be fantastic. And then India coming up next.
Just going through the speculation for transfer news, Cristiano Ronaldo's agent, Jorge Mendes, met with the Chelsea owners last week. He represents other players, of course, but Ronaldo was mentioned, we understand, not interested, as in Ronaldo not interested. Frankie de Jong deal moving closer.
Yeah, he's a fantastic player. Played under Ten Hag at Ajax. They're talking around 65 to 70 million pounds deal. This looks like it's going to go through. It's a fine midfielder, knows Ten Hag, and they both know each other very well. Come over from Barcelona. It's been OK at Barcelona. Probably not reached the heights that he was expected after Ajax, but I think he's going to be a good fit for Manchester United. I know Ronaldo was concerned about the amount of signings, but things are going to get going at Manchester United, and I think Frankie de Jong is just going to be the first of them. And they're all back at training today as well.
Yeah,
season training already.
I wonder if Christian Eriksen's going to be part of what gets moving. Interesting. Just a developing story. It's not on the back pages yet, and this is to do with Derby County.
Yeah, Derby County. It's finally been sold because I say it's been sold. David Clovis is a local property developer. It looks like his bid has been accepted. So thank goodness it looks like Derby are going to be OK. Wayne Rooney left over the weekend. So what's going to happen with him? He says that he's going to go off, finish his coaching badges, and then come back into management after that. But I think it was just like one step too far. He'd stuck around for quite some time, and let's see what happens to Wayne Rooney. Probably not going to be for another 6 months. I don't think that he'll be working again. But Liam Rossigna is going to be taking over as interim manager. Looks like it's going to be OK, so we don't want to see a club like Derby County go.
Paul, leave it there. Thank you very much indeed.
That little email coming in. What a good idea from Eamonn about students in the airport. They're an underutilised workforce resource. That's from Tom Taylor. Keep your thoughts coming in all morning. We're going to take a quick break. After that, we'll go through the papers with Christopher Biggins and Emily Carter. It's a good idea.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Time coming up to 28. Headlines you're waking up to are these.
The Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is expected to call on G7 leaders to do more to help his country in the war against Russia. He'll be addressing them via video link later. The Prime Minister will also call for urgent action to get vital grain out of the country.
Prince Charles has followed in his father's footsteps, becoming patron of the Royal College of Surgeons of Edinburgh. It comes a day after the Sunday Times reported that the Prince of Wales had accepted cash donations totalling €3 million from a former Qatari Prime Minister.
And as we've been discussing this morning, Wimbledon gets underway today with full capacity crowds for the first time in 3 years. Novak Djokovic will defend his 2021 title, while Rafa Nadal will make his first appearance in the Grand Slam tournament since 2019. Welcome back, Rafa.
Let's get into the newspapers. He's already made his announcement, heralded the fact that he is here. That is Mr. Christopher Biggins, who you heard there. You're looking forward to Wimbledon, since summer has arrived.
I love Wimbledon. I think Wimbledon is so fantastic. I'm glued to the television. I think, funny enough, it's better seeing it on television than it is being there.
So often the way, isn't it?
Yeah, you get the atmosphere when you're there, but, you know, there's so many, you know, glasses of champagne, strawberries, things that don't help watch the tennis. Whereas if you're at home, you can really watch the tennis.
And the analysis you get at home.
Absolutely.
It's just, and all the slow-mo
It's brilliant. And, of course, and I'm thrilled that this is the highest ratings they've had from attendance, which is brilliant. I think probably because the last 2 years have been such a disaster.
Yeah, we've also got Emily Carver, columnist at Conservative Home, to go through the papers. And Emily, we're going to start with you.
Yes.
This is page 2 of The Sun, and they talk about wage stagnation.
Yeah, so this is in quite a lot of the papers, I think. So Boris Johnson essentially said there's no point in giving the public sector big pay rises because that will lead to more inflation. And I think he's got a point. It may well do. If people have more money in their pockets, it may well be inflationary, although it may just cover the cost of inflation as well. But I think it's a really bad sort of narrative that the public sector shouldn't get pay rises because it will be inflationary, because we see in other areas in the private sector big companies dishing out the money to try and keep people, because at the moment the labour market is quite full, so people can move around quite easily. So at the same time as some people in the private sector are getting inflation-busting pay rises, not all, of course, but in quite a lot of companies are giving them out, it does seem a little bit of a bad line, really, from Boris Johnson. No, the public sector shouldn't get any pay rises. I think a better line would be to simply get frank and say we can't really afford it at the moment, rather than trying to make it out to be it's because of inflation, which I don't believe.
Well, it could be both, can't
Could
it? To
be
be
both.
honest. I mean, it is inflationary to get a pay rise at this point when we've got rising inflation.
But I mean, they haven't acknowledged that maybe it had something to do with the fact that the Bank of England was allowed to just sort of print money willy-nilly, and that obviously has been inflationary, but I'm not sure this will go down very well.
Will you two go on strike for extra money, Eamonn?
I have absolutely nothing against the principle of going on strike. I defend people's right to strike, and if they think they're getting a bad deal, then so be it. I mean, that's what you have unions for, and I think I would defend people's right to strike on anything. Yeah.
Good.
So, Biggins, you were talking about Wimbledon there, and Emily Raducanu, centre court for her, and Andy Murray as well. I was surprised to hear that Robinson's Barley Water are ending their association with Wimbledon, because the two seem to be absolutely, you know,
synonymous, don't they? I mean, they've been from day one of me watching Wimbledon. It's always been Robinson's there, you know, and that is terribly sad. I also hope that Emma has got herself together, because I was so excited when I first saw her play, and then suddenly it dropped away. I mean, it was all... I don't know quite what's going on with her.
Well, we don't like to do things easily, do we, us Brits?
No, we don't.
Like
You're
to have
right.
a sort of an underdog that sort of stumbles, and then we all sort of are on the edge of our seats.
Yeah.
But, you know, she's perfectly capable.
Well, I think she's more than capable. I mean, she, you know, the US Open she won, which was fantastic, and we were all behind her. I mean, this was a girl that was ours, you know, and we were going to go into Wimbledon.
You talk as if she's gone. You know, she's still, you know...
It sounds like she's just had a bad period. I mean, she's had...
Do you think that's what it is, a bad period?
I mean, she might well have a bad period. I have no idea. That could be pretty crippling when you're playing sports anyway. I got out of playing sports by saying that I was on the time of the month many a time. Swimming, hated it at school. But, yeah...
Never worked for me.
She's had a lot of injuries. She hasn't been able to do her preparation. She's not that experienced on the grass, apparently. So it might be pretty tricky. But she did say she's very much looking forward to being on the centre court for the first time.
Yeah, which I think is very
daunting.
exciting, really exciting. I mean, I can't wait. And I think she's a good player. I think she really is a good player. So we want her to come fighting back.
She's still a baby. She was only doing her A-levels when she was in the US Open,
Well,
wasn't
it looks like she, as Eamonn was saying earlier, it looks like she might be off to Cambridge, and she's certainly an overachiever, isn't she?
She's got
One
options.
Of those. She's beautiful,
She's got options.
she's clever, and she's very talented
Yeah.
at sport. I suppose so often in all of this, you just need a little bit of luck, you know, to get you fighting fit.
She's also very, very attractive.
Yeah, beautiful girl.
Beautiful girl.
She's got lots of modelling
contracts
things.
and endorsements.
Contracts.
This is in the Telegraph, page 12, and the title is Sex Matters. Why does it matter, Emily?
Oh, because the BBC are at it again. They're using the term pregnant people instead of women. And this is in a discussion over the Roe v. Wade ruling with the debate over abortion. Apparently, their US West Coast correspondent used the term on Radio 4 while talking about the Supreme Court's decision to overturn the constitutional right to abortion. Now, fair enough, she's the US West Coast correspondent. Apparently, she was quoting the language used by the chair of the National Abortion Federation. But I don't buy that, really, because the BBC then went to use the term on their main website as well in a separate article. So I do think that there are a lot of people at the BBC who do buy into the sort of gender identity ideology, the sort of extremes of it. And, yes, they're just doing it once again, really. I mean, you could argue, trans men can get pregnant, of course, they have female biology, but I do think it's pretty dismissive to women and their experiences.
What's interesting, this morning waking up, reading the news that the Prime Minister had said that women can't be born with penises, and then the fact that that was newsworthy made me roll my eyes this morning.
But he said that again. He said that a couple of months ago, didn't he? Or a month or two ago as well. And then it was breaking news, of course. And then he was accused of whipping up the culture wars by just answering the question in a straightforward manner. But then other Labour MPs decided to answer the question in a straightforward manner. Oh my God! Remember that was the only question any journalist was asking
at one
ministers
point,
and shadow ministers. Yeah. What's a woman?
Yeah.
Jeez.
Well, big woman taking centre stage, queen of it all, Diana Ross at Glastonbury. We go to The Guardian. What's their take on it, Christopher?
Well, I mean, she was fantastic. It interested me because when we had the Queen's Jubilee, she was terrible. And obviously she didn't rehearse and she didn't know what she was doing, and it was we were terrified she was going to fall in that terrible dress. Whereas yesterday she was fantastic.
You don't like the dress?
Oh, the black and white. No, no, the one she wore for the
Jubilee. Sorry,
the Jubilee. Yes. Well, I think a strange hat, don't you think? But anyway, no, she was much better dressed this time, and she was absolutely fantastic. I think the whole of Glastonbury was wonderful. Did you see Paul McCartney? It was incredible. And what was so wonderful, when Dave Kroll came on and Bruce Springsteen to accompany him, it was so exciting. It made me want to go to Glastonbury. I thought this is what it's all about.
You'd fit in. Apparently it's too white, Glastonbury. So you'd fit in as a...
Oh, perfect.
People have been saying it's too many middle-aged white people there.
And not enough old white people.
Not enough.
Diversity of age.
Sorry, I'm sounding very... I'll be quiet.
Thanks, Emily. No, I thought it was very exciting. I mean, she was great. Paul McCartney was extraordinarily wonderful. And I just love seeing that crowd go...
Can I just interject with the negative comment? Just
yes.
Because, I like to mix it up. And, nothing against all these old cronies. But
yes, your point.
There's a lot of oldies around. Are we not making any new stuff? It's, we've got
they were
Macca, we've got Diana, we've had the Stones at the weekend, we've got Elvis at the cinema.
To be fair, some of the
we've
new
got
stuff.
ABBA coming out. I mean, it's lovely, but we're all sort of... Is this part of the symptom of us all being a bit miserable at the moment? We're all harking back to... Yes,
but it's wonderful stuff.
No, it is wonderful stuff. We're not creating anything of the same calibre, perhaps.
No, but then I think that we're very lucky to draw on what we did have. I mean, you talked about ABBA. The new ABBA show, which I saw last week, is sensational down in Stratford. I mean, I was telling Emily she
Chris was demanding I went to see it.
Well, it is.
Is this the virtual reality one, is it?
It's
I do love ABBA.
fantastic. I mean, absolutely beautifully done. It's a theatre which, what do they call it? A theatre that you can pull down and take anywhere you want. What's it called?
Pop-up.
A pop-up. Thank you very much. A pop-up theatre. And it's wonderful. And the lighting and the design is fantastic. And that you really believe you've seen them.
Yeah.
I mean, it is extraordinary.
Well.
It is extraordinary. No, I think... Go for it. We've created the most wonderful entertainment in songs. And 80 years old, Paul McCartney.
I know.
Well, 80 years old, Mick Jagger, and I went to see him on Saturday night. And
Still got moves?
He's still got moves. Absolutely incredible.
Went to see Mick Jagger.
Yeah, it was like watching Harry Styles up there or something.
Yeah,
well, he definitely models himself.
Definitely, you can see that. And the energy, he was never out of breath. This man has had a some sort of a complicated heart operation. He's just recovering from COVID as well.
Yeah.
Just my respect, absolutely.
I agree.
How old is he now?
80.
80.
Yeah.
Everyone's 80 these days.
Everyone's
Life
80.
begins at 80.
Yeah.
Yeah. Eamonn's 80.
Eamon feels 80, it has to be said. Biggins, thank you very much indeed. Emily Carver, thank you very much indeed.
Now we're turning our attention to the G7. Boris Johnson currently attending that summit in Germany alongside other world leaders.
Back in Britain, MPs are preparing to vote on new legislation to scrap parts of the post-Brexit deal. Now, ahead of that vote, the Foreign Secretary Liz Truss has said the protocol was undermining peace in Northern Ireland. More on this, we're going to go to the Shadow Secretary for Northern Ireland, and that is Peter Kyle. Peter Kyle, good morning to you.
Morning, Eamon.
So, Peter, what's your stance today as to what the government are proposing to do? What do you plan to say on that?
Well, we'll be voting against the protocol bill today simply because it is breaking an international treaty, an international commitment that Britain signed into law. But also, we have to understand that everything in this bill, bar one or two items, is perfectly negotiable. We don't have to put a wrecking ball through the deal in order to deliver for the British economy and also for the Northern Ireland economy, which is what this is really concerning. But also we have to bear in mind, Eamon, that just 2 years ago, Boris Johnson negotiated this deal. He was the one that proposed it to the European Union, insisted it be part of the deal and negotiated it into the treaty. He then said it was a great deal for the British public and British businesses. And then in the manifesto that he stood on, that he drafted and he put to the people, he said there would be no renegotiation. And now they're seeking to break the law, pull out unilaterally of their own deal, and they're saying because the EU won't renegotiate fully. So I think there's a lot of confusion at the moment, and the rest of the world that we're now trying to do deals with elsewhere are looking on aghast at what's happening and the way that Britain is behaving, and they're seeing an untrustworthy country. So the Labour Party wants to restore trust to our international partnerships. We want to make sure that we're a country that people can do deals with and know that when we sign a deal, we stick to it.
But Peter, you could look at it another way. You could look at it that this is all talk and it will be no action from the government. It's to give them a stronger hand. It's to say to the EU, look, we mean business on this. We could go further. We don't want to go further. But, you know, give us a bit of ground here. Surely it's just a negotiating tactic.
Well, the EU does need to be more flexible, and we've said that from the outset. But let's be really clear, the way you put pressure on the EU is to get round the table and out-negotiate them. You don't just stay away from negotiations and then pass a law that unilaterally withdraws from them. Because I think, as we've seen, actually, with Vladimir Putin, that the EU doesn't respond to threats. Actually, it rises to threats. Actually, that's the way that Britain responds. I mean, if the EU, for example, was to unilaterally pass legislation to pull out of the deals it signed and commitments it signed with the UK, how would we respond? I don't think this is the way that we do things with our global partners. The EU is one of many global partners, and whether we're talking about our relationships with the US or the EU or other of our global partners, I don't think the way that we are acting unilaterally, passing legislation that pulls out of our international commitments, which we only signed 2 years ago, is the way forward. If you just bear in mind that we're trying to sign a deal at the moment with India, a comprehensive trade deal, India is now looking at us thinking, well, if we sign a deal with them, in 2 years' time, are they just going to pull out of the bits that they don't like? Actually, what we have to do is stick up for the rule of law, because that is the British way. We make sure that we negotiate our way out, because everything, Eamon, in this deal is negotiable. Bear in mind, if you don't mind, that the last generation under Tony Blair, they delivered peace in Northern Ireland through the most extraordinary statecraft and negotiation. This generation under Boris Johnson, they can't even get a prawn sandwich across the Irish Sea. That's what we're talking about here. We're not talking about big issues. We're talking about individual items of goods, which we just need to get an individual deal through so that it smooths the passage across the Irish Sea. This should be very, very within the bounds of what's negotiable by all the standards that Britain has.
Peter Carl, I've just been reading Matt Hancock, of course, who is former health secretary. He presided over a lot of the vaccine rollout and talks extensively in a piece in the Times today about the problems he encountered because of the very rigid interpretation from the European Union of the protocol and the problems with getting medicines into Northern Ireland. And he says quite clearly this legislation does not break the law. Why? Well, it's quite simply really outlined very clearly by the necessity principle, where there's a clash of two agreements, a nation-state can decide which one it follows. To suggest the UK is doing something illegal risks harming one of our most important friendships. What do you say to that?
Well, firstly, it's interesting that he uses the example of medicine, because we came to an agreement with the EU back at Christmas on medicines. So medicines is no longer an issue in Northern Ireland. How did we come to that? We negotiated. But it also points to how they failed, because they couldn't actually get to an agreement, because the UK couldn't agree to sign on the document. So the EU and the UK both unilaterally published legislation which agreed with each other. But medicine, it was a slightly dysfunctional agreement, but medicine is no longer an issue. On the issue about the legal status of necessity, let's be really clear. The last time that Britain used necessity as a legal argument was back in 1969, when we had to take military action against forcible action against an oil tanker that was threatening the environment. So what that means is that the British state has no alternative at all. Very hard to say that necessity is the legal basis on a deal that we signed and negotiated ourselves. Nobody forced us. There was no pressure on Britain other than our own pressure. We voluntarily entered a legal agreement. So to say that necessity is the legal basis for this is very hard to say.
Well, you will also know, as Shadow Northern Ireland Secretary, that there are a lot of people in Northern Ireland who are very happy with the protocol as it exists. And therefore, I'm having this painted as a solely economic problem, isn't actually totally true. This is a political problem of which the government are helping the Democratic Unionist Party out of a hole on this one, because this brings, or the threat is that it brings Irish unification much closer.
Well, you're completely right that because the government have been so unsuccessful in negotiations, and it's been, for most of the time, hasn't actually engaged in negotiations, bearing in mind it's been almost 2.5 months since the UK even had a conversation officially with the EU about progress. Because of the lack of progress, then, of course, political unrest has been fermented, and distrust in the protocol and frustration at the lack of progress on the unionist side. Now, what we have to do is recognise this. I understand that the unionists see the protocol as an existential threat, and we have to engage with them on their own terms on this. What the DUP have always said is they want negotiated progress, but they want solid progress in order to assure them that into the future, any barriers in the Irish Sea become almost non-existent. And I believe that is negotiable over a solid period of time. But yes, Liz Truss has said that she's taking this unilateral action because the protocol has lost consent of one of the communities. And bearing in mind, because of power sharing, both the nationalist and the unionist communities have a power of veto over the executive in Northern Ireland.
Look,
but let's be really clear. The DUP voted against the protocol in the first place, so it never had consent from the DUP. So the government is picking up the Good Friday Agreement when it suits it, and it's putting it down and ignoring it when it doesn't. That's part of the problem we have now.
Yeah, well, these changes to the protocol will be going before Parliament. As you say, you'll be voting against those changes. Peter Carl, Shadow Northern Ireland Secretary, good to get your thoughts this morning. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. We'll leave it there. Right, we'll hit the break, and when we're back, latest from the G7 summit, which is taking part in Germany. OK, after this.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
The Prime Minister urges world leaders to stand firm against Russia during the crucial G7 summit.
Good morning. It's 1 minute past 8 o'clock. It is Monday, the 27th of June. This is Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn, Holmes and Isabel Webster.
Thank you very much indeed for your company, for tuning in and leading the news this morning. This is what we've got.
The Prime Minister will address world leaders at the G7 summit today, where he's expected to ask them to take urgent action to end Putin's grip on global food prices. It comes as he agrees a renewed military surge in Ukraine with the French President Emmanuel Macron.
A gas explosion in Birmingham that destroyed a house and badly damaged 3 others has left a man with life-threatening injuries. 4 other men suffered more minor injuries but were discharged by paramedics.
And it's Wimbledon fortnight. It starts today with full capacity crowds for the first time since the start of the pandemic. All eyes will be on Emma Raducanu and Sir Andy Murray as they take to centre court on day 1.
Maybe you're going, maybe you're lucky enough to be there, maybe you're in that queue. Send us a selfie, send us a picture. You can join in any of our discussions by emailing us, gbviews@GB News, or you can tweet those pictures to us at GB News.
And also big news as well. We're looking out for a people's champion. A few of you already have emailed in with people in your community that you really want to celebrate. Is there an unsung hero, someone who deserves a special shout out? If so, we want to hear about them. We want to share some positive stories about British communities.
You know, maybe it's somebody who organises the community, that organises visits in the community to people who are isolated, lonely or elderly. Maybe it's someone who has taken it upon themselves, I know in our area, someone who takes it upon themselves to organise a food bank or donations to food bank, and they put this box outside their house every week and you go to it and you donate your food there.
Yeah, or somebody, I was at my parents' this weekend, their next door neighbour was hosting a barbecue for all of the Ukrainians that were living in the town. 180 of them came for a barbecue.
180?
Just in that one town in Surrey. Amazing.
My word.
Yeah, so absolutely. Whoever you may be, we want to hear your unsung hero stories.
You know what I think? I think it's people who would do things that you couldn't be bothered with. You know, that the rest of us, you sort of think, well, I've got a life to lead, I've got to look after my kids, I've got to get the car washed, I've got to cut the grass or whatever it is. And people who just do other things, people who care more than maybe the rest of us would like to admit. So do that. Tweet at GB News, or you can email gbviews@gbnews.uk.
So our top story this morning, the Prime Minister will address Western leaders today at the G7 summit in Bavaria. He's expected to urge them to end Putin's stranglehold on food prices and to stand strong in the face of Russian aggression.
Now, this comes after the Prime Minister held talks with the French President, where they agreed on a renewed surge in military support for Ukraine.
Well, let's speak to our reporter, Paul Hawkins, who's in Bavaria in the Alps for us this morning. Another really busy day for the G7 leaders, not least with a video call with President Zelensky first thing.
Yeah, absolutely. He's going to be addressing the G7 later on. Yesterday he gave his nightly televised speech to the Ukrainian people, in which he said that delaying arms deliveries was an invitation to Russia to strike again and again. When he addresses the G7 leaders today, he's essentially going to say that partners need to move faster if they are really partners, not observers. And that means that is a message to those that are thinking about potentially, possibly, and in places like France and Germany, there are voices who say maybe it's time for Ukraine to start thinking about doing a deal with Russia whereby it cedes territory and in return the conflict is brought to a speedy end. And one of the reasons that is pushing up prices around the world when it comes to fuel and when it comes to food is eliminated. Now, let's be clear, Boris Johnson yesterday banging the drum, saying that we need unity. So too was Joe Biden. We heard it when we saw Boris Johnson meeting with Emmanuel Macron in that meeting. And essentially he's saying that we need to stay the course. We need to keep supplying Ukraine with money. We need to keep supplying Ukraine with weapons, and that we need to hold the course. Otherwise, it's a red rag to someone like Vladimir Putin, who could then think, well, this is the green light to go and invade other countries. So we'll hear from Volodymyr Zelensky later today. We'll also hear addresses from the leaders of South Africa, India, Argentina, Indonesia. Those countries are at the moment, they've been invited by Germany to attend the G7 summit today. Their main priority is the price of food. They see the conflict, the Russia-Ukraine conflict, as a European problem that Europe needs to sort out, and that actually the Western sanctions on Russia are making it worse for world food prices. So they just want to see a speedy resolve to this. Germany's invitation is effectively a way of saying, look, we do understand your concerns. We're going to try and support you. You don't need to keep going to China and Russia for help and support in whatever way you need it. We can help provide that support. And from the G7's point of view, that means that they're gaining more influence and countering that Russian-Chinese influence.
Paul, thank you very much indeed. Stunning scenery of Bavaria. That G7 takes place with that as its backdrop. Now, I'll tell you what we're doing. Thanks, Paul. We've been inundated with people getting in touch with us today as GB viewers, GB News viewers and listeners. And the next one is, who was the next one?
Michael Libra.
Michael Libra. We go to Marlow in Buckinghamshire. Michael, good morning to you.
Good morning, Eamonn.
Very good to see you, Michael. We'll just adjust your microphone there so we can hear you. And in the studio here, we've got Harry Phibbs. Harry's the local government editor of Conservative Home. And beside me on the other side, Chris Curtis, who's the pollster, who's been talking about what the general public are saying about Boris Johnson. But first of all, you, Michael, what is it you want to get across? What is it you want to say?
I think really the problem that we have at the moment is a lot of infighting. It's not Boris who would lose the next election. It's actually the Tory MPs themselves. The fact is that when you have a manager, the team supporting the manager need to be 100% behind that individual. Unfortunately, we have a situation where, for their own reasons, you have MPs who are infighting. Many of those are people who oppose Brexit. A number of those people are those who aspire to become the next PM. It's interesting, isn't it, when you see Keir Starmer, when he has a problem such as Beergate, his team rally round him. When Boris has Partygate, which is old news now, they don't rally round him. So I think the biggest problem we have is wanting to have somebody who is backed, supported, and is getting on with running the country.
Michael, I want to bring in Chris Curtis, who is the pollster from Opinion. He wants to ask you a question, actually.
Well, I was just going to ask you a question, if that's all right, about... Because obviously Boris Johnson came in because there was another time when there was division in the Conservative Party. There were lots of Conservative MPs, many of which also wanted to be Prime Minister, and they moved against Theresa May. And that's how Boris Johnson became Prime Minister in the first place. So I think, you know, if people should always be loyal towards the leader of the Conservative Party and the team should always get behind the manager, In hindsight, do you think they were wrong to do that to Theresa May back then?
I think any manager needs to have the support of his team. And I think that the biggest problem we have in this country is there are too many pollsters, there's too much media coverage, there's too much negativity going on. The United Kingdom is a great country. We need to have people who pass that message across as opposed to always criticising what we're doing.
OK, well, that told you, Chris, didn't it? Too many pollsters. I just want to read out a couple of the GB views, and many of them agreeing with you, Michael. This one coming in from Carol. Johnson has massive support outside of the London bubble. It's something the mainstream media will never understand. And Ryan says, I don't think Boris Johnson has the slightest concern about what the media thinks. He's just getting on with the job at hand, like we asked him to do in 2019. If I could just bring in Harry Phipps at this point, though, from Conservative Home. The point about people outside of London, you know, it's all this Westminster bubble that loathe Boris Johnson. That's not borne out in what we saw in the by-election result last week, was it?
No, and I think that what I would agree with Michael is that if you have a sort of constant division and undermining of Boris Johnson, I think that will make things difficult for him. And in a way, the Conservative Party rules are meant to be that you allow this challenge and then that's it for a year, and you give Boris a chance to get on with it. And I think that probably there'll be, despite this speculation to the contrary, I suspect that the Conservatives will stick to that for the reasons that Michael was given. But the Lib Dems are a phenomenal by-election machine, so I wasn't particularly surprised by that. I mean, what's in a way is interesting, going back to being too many pollsters. There are an awful lot of opinion polls that come out, and Chris would follow this more than I would, but they actually, the Labour lead isn't huge. You know, I think there was one in the Times this morning saying, 4%, sometimes it's 3%, 5%, 6%. You know, they're sort of single figure. So I don't think it's an insurmountable Labour lead. I think Boris Johnson, could if things start getting a bit better for him, he could recover.
No, Chris, Harry is all ears there. Harry's got his way. He thinks there's too many pollsters, there's too many people asking awkward questions or making negative political commentary towards the government and indeed Boris Johnson. And if you would all just shut up and go away, everything would be OK. Would you like to tell Michael what's happening in the world outside Marlow as regards his concerns and people's view towards his leader?
That's 2 points. Firstly, I'd be more than happy for there to be fewer pollsters, because it'd be more work for me. As long as I'm one of them, that's fine. Secondly, I spend a lot of time outside the Westminster. If you look at my socks, I'm wearing Milton Keynes socks because I'm a proud Milton Keynes. It's got Milton Keynes skyline. Yeah. And I spend a lot of my time outside the Westminster bubble, including as part of my job. You know, we go all around the country. We run polling. We run focus groups. We make sure the samples that we speak to are representative of the country, and that's really important. Actually, polling is one of the ways that we can get views from outside the kind of people that we normally speak to.
Nobody's asked me.
I missed that, but...
Well, no, that's actually a really interesting point Michael Lieber makes, and we get emails saying this all the time, is who are these pollsters interviewing? Because nobody's asked me. That's what Michael's saying. And I don't ever calls me and asks my opinion either. I'm quite grateful they don't. I don't want to talk about my opinions. But, lots of people do wonder who pollsters go after. Tell us a bit about the process involved.
You don't need to speak to everybody. You need to make sure that you speak to a representative sample of people in the country. It's like when you're testing water in the swimming pool. You don't need to take all of the water out to work out what's in it when they're testing it to see how clean it is. They just test a little sample and then they can tell the overall quality of the water in the swimming pool. Although, of course, people are far more complicated than water, and that's where polls fall down, isn't it? Because people are increasingly voting along different lines. People are more politically homeless, perhaps, than in any other previous time. And we talk about this all the time, don't we, Eamonn? People come in and say, I don't identify myself entirely with what the Conservatives represent now, because I used to be a Conservative, but here they are with highest taxation in 70 years. That's not so people are sort of a bit all over the place People
now.
are far more complicated than they used to be. And that's actually one of the things that we can pick up through opinion polls. So actually, the kind of work we've done, what we've noticed is there's a lot fewer sort of tribal people who are tribally loyal towards a political party, and a lot more sort of compare the market voters who switch between political parties a lot more frequently. And that's why we see sort of kind of crazy swings. That's why we saw the result in Tiverton and Hoddesdon, for example, where so many people who had loyally voted for the Conservatives for so long switched to the Liberal Democrats.
But just in short, I want to bring Harry back in here very shortly, but just would you say to Michael, he made a very robust defence of Boris Johnson there. From the way you see it, would it be different than the way Harry sees it?
Well, it's not about what I see, it's about the way the country sees it. And the country who gave Boris Johnson that landslide election victory a few years ago have gone off Boris Johnson. He might be able to turn it around, but at this moment in time, far more people disapprove of the job the Prime Minister's doing than approve of the job
that's not right.
doing.
OK, go on, Michael, have your say.
No, that's not right. I think that there is the silent majority, and there is, unfortunately, a group of people who are the minority who shout the loudest and get heard. The fact is that...
Yes, it's not about shouting, Michael, it's about polling. It's not about shouting, it's about polling, and that's a different science, isn't it, Chris?
My job is to survey the silent majority, and at the moment they've gone off Prime Minister.
Well, let's take polling. Brexit was a good example where the pollsters got it wrong.
We didn't, at Opinion.
The election was a good example of where they got it wrong.
We nailed the 2019 general election at Opinion. We called every single party to the exact vote share that they ended up getting, apart from the Green Party, who we overestimated by 1%.
OK. Michael, Harry, you've been sitting listening to all of this now.
Yes, I mean, I think Charles Moore put it quite well in the Telegraph, where he said that what Boris Johnson needs is to put a postcode into his political sat-nav. And I think that in terms of getting people clear, getting Conservatives back on board and to be enthused about it, it is about policy, and certainly tax cuts is a big one. Us getting rid of a lot of the EU regulation we've inherited, not having foreign judges telling us what to do. So I think it's possible to turn things round, but I think he needs to have a clear direction and have strong Conservative policies, and that's what I think the Conservative MPs will be looking out for.
I just want to give Michael the final word in this whole segment. Of course, our GB view is at the heart of everything we do. Look, we're looking at a difficult summer in this country. We've talked about problems with the airports. There's strikes going on. There's, as we've been discussing this morning, ruminations within the Conservative Party, a little bit of discontent there as well. The Prime Minister's decided to postpone his cabinet reshuffle to try and calm things down, have a bit of breathing space. What do you think we need to see from Prime Minister Boris Johnson to let the country really shine again?
It's not just from Boris. We need to see unity. There are 100 MPs who are infighting within the Conservative Party. This is ridiculous. We're in an economic war. When you're in a war situation, you need to have everybody pulling together. I'm afraid that all we see is Boris bashing at every opportunity. He's made mistakes. I agree, he's made mistakes, but so too do other people. He's human, and that's one of the reasons why people actually like him. What you see is what you get.
Got from you today, Michael, certainly straight talking there, and very interesting to hear your analysis and your opinions. Live from Marlow in Buckinghamshire, that's a GB News viewer and listener, Michael Libra. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you to Harry Phibbs as well and Chris Curtis, both giving their views in the studio with us this morning. OK,
well, we're not done yet. If you want to be a GB News listener or viewer, get in touch. We'll get you on there. gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet at GB News.
Right, with the time at 8:18, we're going to bring you up to date on the latest headlines this hour. And Russia has launched a series of deadly missile strikes in the Ukrainian capital for the first time in weeks. A number of people were trapped underneath fallen rubble and pulled to safety after Moscow forces hit homes and a kindergarten near Kyiv. The attacks have left at least one person dead and 6 others injured.
The Justice Secretary, Dominic Raab, says the barrister strikes starting today are regrettable and will only delay justice for victims. The strikes are part of a dispute over legal aid funding, with barristers also refusing to accept new cases or step in for colleagues whose cases are overrunning.
Wimbledon gets underway today with full capacity crowds for the first time in 3 years. Novak Djokovic will defend his 2021 title, while Rafa Nadal will make his first appearance in the Grand Slam tournament.
since.
Off. Yeah, not his first ever appearance, just since 2019, sorry.
Well, anyway, you know, we were talking about those car pictures
yeah.
earlier on, and people were sending us pictures of what they think is a risky colour for their car or an odd choice.
Just asking,
car.
what does your car colour say about you?
Say about you? Well, this is from Michael. Let's see Michael's car. Michael loves to celebrate.
Oh, now you're talking.
Well, that's
my dream car.
Yeah,
I'm not even joking, that's my dream car. I want that.
Isabel, have you ever ridden in one of those?
Yes, they're freezing cold and they're very bumpy, but
Bum
they just
shakers.
represent to me the perfect weekend.
The new Defender is a beautiful car.
Nah, it's too urban. I like that one.
OK, well, British heritage. That represents British heritage with that Land Rover. That is an original colour. I'm not sure whether you would call that... It's, well, some form of green. I don't think it's British racing green, but it's...
It's a good country green.
It's a good country green. It's hard to beat.
I really like that car. There you go.
Hard to beat.
I wasn't expecting to get so enthusiastic. There you go.
Yes.
Just comes left field with us.
Lovely.
Right, we're going to talk about Birmingham and this big explosion happened about 8:30 last night, and just out of nowhere it destroyed a house and it badly damaged 3 others and has left 1 man with life-threatening injuries, including 4 men as well, who suffered more minor injuries but have been discharged from hospital.
Yeah, well, the emergency services were called just after 8:30 last night. The incident was on Dulwich Road in King's Standing. We're going to speak again to Martin Ward-White. He's the area commander for the West Midlands Fire Service. Martin, good morning to you. I know an incredibly busy night for you. You've got to safeguard the whole area there. Are you any closer to finding out what caused the explosion?
So that investigation has now started with our fire investigation officer. What I would like to do, though, is just provide an update around some of those impacted by this incident. In terms of the gentleman that's in hospital, we don't have an update there in terms of any change. But what I can confirm now, sadly, is that overnight we did find the body of 1 female within the property that exploded. Unfortunately, due to the difficulties and obviously being able to get that lady out of the property and also police investigations around identification, we were unable to obviously release that information up until now. But I can sadly confirm that now in this incident, 1 individual female has unfortunately lost her life.
Very, very sad, but hardly surprising, Martin, when you look at the devastation from whatever caused the overall blast. And you've got how many houses impacted with this? What, 3? Is it more than 3?
Yes, so there's 4 buildings or properties that are directly impacted. That equates to, we have had to evacuate 8 homes though. So that equates to about 21 people who are either currently in hotels or with family members.
Right, Martin, thank you. So what happens next, Martin? What is scheduled for the day ahead as regards your job?
So from an investigation perspective, to manage expectations, this is going to be, a fairly long, drawn-out process. People will have seen the images and the video footage on media and social media around the devastation caused. As a result of that, we've got to now go through that building methodically to try and identify the cause of this. In doing so, obviously, we don't want to risk the lives of our personnel or those of police or the gas board in doing that investigation after sort of clearing the building of, any casualties overnight.
Yeah, and of course, look, the fact that somebody's lost their life makes this an incredibly, an even more serious situation than before. Just give us an insight into what the sort of protocols are when you arrive at a scene like this and you instantly assume there's some sort of gas explosion. You obviously need to try and get the utilities switched off and evacuate people. But you were telling us this morning that, obviously you do put yourselves in harm's way as firefighters and risk your own lives in these sorts of situations when there is an emergency.
Yes, so the best source of information when we turn up are members of the public, certainly individuals that we know, reside in the property. And very quickly we were able to establish that many of the properties around the affected property the residents were able to evacuate. So we were very quickly able to identify where there was potential casualties. In addition to this, the gentleman who was taken to hospital, who remains with life-threatening injuries, also provided us some indication last night, that there was another individual within the property. That's when we started to deploy our specialist equipment into that property to be able to search both visually and audibly for any signs of life. It was during that process that we identified that sadly an individual female had lost her life. We've managed to obviously retrieve the body, and as a result of that, obviously the police now will be identifying the next of kin and obviously reaching out to those as well.
We can only hope and pray.
Sorry.
Yeah, but we can only hope and pray there are no more bodies to be found. In the meantime, you and your people who work for you, Martin, in the fire service, keep safe, and good luck with the work that you've got to do today. Appreciate your time this morning and keeping us informed. Thank you, Martin Ward-White.
Yeah, so just an update then on that breaking news, that we knew there was one man in hospital being treated for life-threatening injuries, but as Martin was just explaining to us, he was able to tell medics that there was a woman also in that property, and they have since established that a lady lost her life in that explosion in Birmingham last night.
Just to say, Isabel, our previous GB viewer from Marlow,
Michael Libra.
Michael Libra, a lot of support coming from you as to what he has had to say about the present political situation.
Yeah, lots of emails coming in saying, I haven't been polled either, totally agree with what he's saying, too much Boris bashing, and also saying Michael Libra was absolutely right, everybody needs to get behind the Prime Minister. Really interesting to hear those views and have that sort of panel discussion. If you'd like to be one of our guests discussing the politics of the day, let us know. We'd love to hear from you. We're trying to get someone on at least once every day. Perhaps, well, today we've had a wealth of you getting in touch, so perhaps you might get your chance this week as well. Let us know.
GB Views at gbnews.uk. Coming up, money's already tight, but now we need to be prepared for the autumn. Kate Hardcastle, what she thinks, she'll be sharing her top money-saving tips after the weather update.
Looking ahead to today's weather, and the UK is looking rather unsettled for a time, with showery conditions gradually spreading eastwards. Let's take a look at the details. So, by the middle of the day, the worst of the showers should be clearing from southwest England to leave most parts dry with some sunny spells. However, temperatures will be disappointing for late June. Meanwhile, showers will be breaking out more widely across the southeast, and here a few of them could turn heavy with a chance of some thunder. Across Wales, one or two light showers are likely, but drier and brighter weather will gradually be spreading in across the country from the west. A few heavy and possibly thundery showers will affect the East Midlands, whilst across Birmingham and other more western areas the showers will start to ease, with more in the way of sunshine developing. Across northeast England, a mix of bright spells and scattered, locally heavy and perhaps thundery downpours are on the cards, with temperatures close to 20 degrees in the sunniest spots. Edinburgh and other eastern parts of mainland Scotland could also catch some hefty showers around noon, but across the rest of Scotland the showers should be less heavy and fewer in number. The middle of the day doesn't look too bad for Northern Ireland though, as here any showers will be very isolated, with most parts staying dry and at times quite bright. Heavy showers then will ease across eastern parts to leave a mostly fine end to the day, although rain will arrive across Northern Ireland later. And that's how your weather is shaping up for the rest of your Monday.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
With the time just gone 8:30, still to come on your breakfast in GB News this morning. This is what we've got.
It's still on the front pages this morning. We'll be discussing the calls to investigate the alleged bag of cash that was given to Prince Charles by a former Qatari Prime Minister. We'll find out what royal commentator Ingrid Stewart thinks at 8:45.
I wouldn't mind getting a bag of cash. Nothing would feel as good, I would imagine.
The question would be why? Why would you be good?
Also today, the Prime Minister is preparing to discuss the global food shortage at the G7 summit. We're going to be speaking to the Environment Secretary, George Eustice, about that one. That's just after 9 o'clock, about tackling President Putin's stranglehold on the food supply chain.
And as ever, you can get involved in any of our discussions. Email us, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet us at gbnews. And I should say, Michael's a bit of a hero to you guys this morning. Email after email after email. So well done, Michael. You seem to have struck a chord with the viewers and listeners this morning.
Here we are. It's Money Monday and time to catch up with Kate Hardcastle, who's back for our weekly dose of money mindfulness. Kate, you're saying we need to curb spending now in time for the autumn, which people really won't want to hear because a lot of people they want to enjoy summer first. But what's your plan? What's your attack on all of this?
Well, good morning, both. Sorry I'm not with you. I've got a whole Steve Martin planes, trains and automobiles going on at the moment. But absolutely, I'm out there and seeing exactly that people who feel that they've had 2 years without being able to go and do the things that they love, wanting to go out to the festivals, wanting to go out and see the sport and making sure they're catching up on those holidays. It completely makes sense. All I'm saying is we know that we've got a tough autumn ahead, autumn, winter particularly. The fuel bills are going to kick in even stronger rates. It's going to be more challenging as we see more food inflation on the cards. And I think it's probably a good idea to start getting into the habit of making sure you know how to budget and when. There's always a good time to make a saving, Eamonn and Isabel, as you know. So it's a few tips to make sure that you stay on top of that food shopping particularly. I've been out and about in the supermarkets. You have to walk the floors every week. Interestingly, we've had these supermarket comparison websites for a few years to be able to use. A lot of them have changed, actually. One shut down last year and another one might be shutting down very soon. So if you did rely on those supermarket comparison websites, just take a look. They might not be there. For me, it's going out and walking the floors, and it does change each week. What I thought was really interesting in the news of late was that actually we have what we call the big four, the supermarkets that tend to be where we do most of our shopping. And it could well look that for the first time, Aldi will actually overtake from Morrison's there. A lot of people using those Aldi and Lidl brands to make sure they get their bargains. I think that tends to be on the smaller shops. For me, I'm seeing that Asda are doing a great job on the big shop right now.
OK, so those are the big shops. And when I think of, when we're talking about people saving over the summer months, I mean, we've all just seen these pictures, haven't we? I've had serious FOMO over the weekend. If people haven't been at Glastonbury, they've been at the Stones. If they haven't been at the Stones, they've been at Elton John. Everyone's been out making the most, as you say, of those relaxation in the rules. And they're sort of like money saving. I don't want to hear it. But you're suggesting that people should do spend free weekends to try and make sure that they pocket some cash. So if you do want to have a splurge, make sure you balance it.
We've got to make sure we've got the savings in the bank for autumn, winter. It's going to be a difficult time. Absolutely go out and enjoy it. We understand a lot of people have got pent-up demand for that. it's understandable. But I'm talking about a no-spend weekend. Over the summer, can you perhaps at least try and do one every 3-4 weeks where you just go and challenge yourself not to actually spend money, but to save money? It's actually easier than it sounds. We've got a lot of free events going on through the summer. Take a look online. You'll see a lot of things going on. Getting the kids involved as well. We use Monopoly money at home to try and explain to the children the idea of budgeting, getting into the idea that days out don't have to be those big costly things where it might be including a theme park, admissions, and we know fuel costs really going up as well. So I think it's very much about trying to get into the discipline of budgeting. So actually, when it does get tough, you're not really feeling that you're going from one extreme to the other, but it might be a little bit more balanced.
It's really depressing hearing you say, when it does get tough. People are thinking this is bad the way it is, but that Kate is saying, come October, you ain't seen nothing yet. For headlines are grabbing your attention, Isabel.
Oh, well, the front of the Mail today, Kate, I don't know if you've had a chance to see it, but they're talking about Britain being the fraud capital of the world, with a really shocking statistic about some number, 40 million of us getting scammed. Horrendous.
It really is the case that we have to watch what we're doing. More of us shopping online than ever before, and we've got to feel comfortable that we understand what's going on with our details. A lot of this, Isabel, is where people are getting phone calls or they're getting emails and they're responding to them. Some great advice online from Citizens Advice. But first and foremost, if you get an email or a phone call from your bank asking you for transfers of money, asking you to give details, just hang up straight away and make sure you call your bank directly. Ask them if they're trying to get in contact with you. If it shouldn't have been your bank at all. They shouldn't be asking you to do any of those things. But if your bank wants to get hold of you, they'll be happy that you contact them. Turn it around. Make sure you are aware. There's so much advice online, but I know we're going to be covering this in a couple of weeks with some top tips as well on how to stay safe online and making sure that you don't fall foul to these awful, awful people.
That's Money Monday with Kate Hardcastle, our consumer expert. Thank you very much indeed, Kate. We'll leave it there.
OK, stay with us. We're going to go through the papers today. We are going to go through them one last time with Christopher Biggins and Emily Carver. That's after this.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
coming up to 21 minutes before 9 o'clock, bringing you up to date with what's happening news-wise. And firefighters in Birmingham have confirmed that a woman was killed in a suspected gas explosion at a house there last night.
Yeah, a man who was rescued still in hospital in a life-threatening condition. Witnesses described clambering past flaming debris and finding the man trapped against the fridge before helping him out on a mattress.
The Ukrainian president is expected to call on G7 leaders to do more to help his country in the war against Russia when he addresses them via video link later today. The Prime Minister will also call for urgent action to get vital grain out of Ukraine, and we're going to be talking about that just after 9 o'clock this morning with George Eustice, the Secretary of State for the Environment, Food and Rural Affairs.
Wimbledon gets underway today with full capacity crowds for the first time in 3 years. Novak Djokovic will defend his 2021 title, while Rafael Nadal will make his first appearance in the Grand Slam tournament since 2019.
Let's read all about it in the Monday morning newspapers with Conservative Home columnist Emily Carver and the actor Christopher Biggins. Emily, it's you we begin with. It's the Daily Telegraph. This is page 7. And we talk about the possible summer of discontent. The headline is Labour must oppose pay strikes, says David Lammy.
Yes, this is interesting. There's quite a lot of infighting and disagreement at the heart of the Labour Party over whether they should be supporting strikes come what may. This is referring... I think Keir Starmer also tried to ban MPs from sort of being on the picket line, but that didn't seem to work because there have been lots of Labour MPs, of course, out there with the RMT and with others campaigning for higher wages and so on. But David Lammy, he's a big figure in the Labour Party, and he's said that Labour should categorically oppose a 10% pay rise for airport workers. So, of course, there's now a row from Labour supporters, Labour members, Labour MPs, the idea that Labour should always back strikes and that this isn't it's not very socialist not to back these strikes. And so this is going to be a reoccurring theme, I think, over the summer, because Labour, they need to try and have a line on this. You know, are they going to back strikes, whatever the case, whatever the cause, or are they going to be a bit more nuanced about it? Lammy seems to think that no government can just back strikes and that if they want to be serious and taken seriously, they can't just be out on the picket line campaigning for whatever cause. So I think it's quite sensible from David Lammy, but I'm sure he'll get quite a lot of heat from the left of the party.
Pretty sure that most would agree with that. Christopher, what about this story? Sad news yesterday. Frank Williams dead at the age of 90. In the Mirror running this story called Star of Dad's Army.
Yeah, he was a wonderful man. I knew him really well. He was wonderful. He was a fantastic actor and it really gave his all because he was quite a religious man. So playing a vicar in this iconic series was wonderful for him. And now he was thrilled to get the role and played it for many seasons. I happened to be in the same restaurant when he was 90. Celebrating his birthday. So it was lovely. I'm very sad. But, you know, 90 is a very good age. I mean, you know.
Good innings, as
they say.
Good innings,
as they say.
Which restaurant was that, then? Where does one celebrate one's 90th?
Well, it was Joe Allen's, funnily enough, the new Joe Allen's in Covent Garden.
Very nice.
So it's a theatrical restaurant, so a theatrical honour for Frank. But he was a lovely man, and I was telling someone earlier today, you know, years ago, when we used to do all these situation comedies, there was a rehearsal room at the BBC in North Acton, which was on 13 floors, 3 rehearsal rooms on each floor. And every time you went there, you got into the lift. I remember vividly getting in the lift one day, and there was Morecambe and Wise. I went, hi, how are you? Never having met them before, because they'd been in my sitting room every Saturday. You know, and it was a wonderful atmosphere. It was absolutely fantastic.
Did they know who you were?
Of course they did.
They were very nice, but I was starting off my career. You know, it was porridge days.
Porridge days, yeah. I was in those rehearsal rooms. I went to interview David Jason many, many years ago, and they were acting out or rehearsing Fools and Horses. Yeah. So it was amazing to see.
And at the top, there was a canteen. Well, that was unbelievable. Every table had someone famous at it. I mean, it was extraordinary.
Yeah.
People used to go there and have their be announced over the tannoy system in order to get work.
Wow.
You know, because you suddenly heard their name. You know, would Eamonn Holmes please go? Oh, Eamonn Holmes, he'd be very good.
Yes, so they deliberately did that. I do remember the same situation at BBC Television Centre in its heyday, just going to the canteen and sitting there and just an amazing array of names, you know.
It sounds like the canteen backstage at Glastonbury as well. When I worked at the BBC, I got backstage pass, and you could just sit, and everyone was there. I mean, it wasn't just music stars; it was everyone.
Yeah.
Sort of all hobnobbing around the back behind the pyramid stage.
I mean, someone said
Sounds
yesterday
ghastly.
that she was going to the loo and she passed Bruce Springsteen.
Yes,
you know,
you do. Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Yeah,
Very
absolutely
exciting.
brilliant.
Let's talk about woke schools, Emily. This is in the Daily Mail. Parents demand to see secret gender lessons.
Yeah, so this is a story that was over the weekend, but it's also run over to the Monday papers. Essentially, parents, a mother, decided to pull their child from a school because they were teaching not only about gender identity ideology, but also about Black Lives Matter in a very politicised manner. So they were using materials from America and essentially perpetuating that idea of white privilege. And what's interesting is that this school is in southeast London, it's 87% ethnic minority, and they were singling out, this, by the sounds of it, singling out the white children as having white privilege, which I don't think is particularly helpful.
Is this a primary school or secondary school?
Secondary school.
Haberdashers Hatcham College in southeast London.
Yeah, so now apparently there are a group of parents, or led by this particular mother, to see the contents of those lessons. Because, of course, the ministers, the government, have been quite outspoken on this and said you can't teach these kind of theories of white privilege and so on, gender identity, without balance. And it shouldn't be taught in an indoctrinating way, of course. But it seems like a lot of schools are using materials that, a lot of parents would not be happy with.
I think this is a really interesting debate. I mean, when you talk about the subject of just sex education, good old-fashioned birds and the bees, there used to be consultations with parents about whether you wanted your child to participate in that or whether perhaps it offended your religious beliefs, whatever. Well, at least that was the case when I was growing up. There would always be a couple of odd kids that would be kept out of the sex ed classes. But you feel like if there's a discussion of this magnitude, as a parent, you would like to know what your children are being taught and at least to have some sort of discussion about that. And the idea that this could happen in secret, I think most parents would probably find quite alarming if they drilled into it was being, the details of it.
Exactly, and apparently they were using materials from following the George Floyd murder in the US to sort of depict race relations in this country. And anyone knows that our history is very, very different from that of America, and that has no bearing on how people experience life in this country. So very frustrating, but it's good to see that some parents are trying to, find out what their kids are actually being taught.
Thank goodness.
In the Mail, also, Christopher, this is page 14. Rupert Murdoch might have ended his marriage with Jerry Hall over a text message, it has been claimed. Does it matter? Why does it matter?
Well, I think it's extraordinary that he should do something like that. I mean, presumably their marriage must be at the lowest ebb ever. I mean, apparently he hated her smoking. Well, he must have known that she smoked when they married. It was very odd to use that. But I think it's a rather cowardly way of, if he did do it. And, of course, I don't know, she must be thrilled, I would think, because now she doesn't have to live with a 91-year-old man. She can go with a lot of money and find someone much younger.
Well, who knows? They might have a prenup. She might have nothing to
No,
show
I
for
think
her endeavours.
there was a prenup, but I think the prenup is awfully good.
Oh, right, OK.
Yes, I don't.
She's independently wealthy, though, as well.
Yes, she is. She is. So I don't think we have to worry about her financially.
How big an insult is it for major decisions like that to be conducted over text?
If my husband dumped me over text, I mean, it would be bad enough he was dumping me, but over text. No, thank you. Give me some respect. If we've got married and spent years of our lives together, then sit me down and have the,
But maybe they couldn't talk anymore. Maybe it was
acrimony.
Yeah, it had got to the stage where it could only be done by a text.
I proposed to my wife over text. I didn't really see her complaining about that.
Did you?
Why is that different?
Well, I think that's quite nice to actually text.
Well, I could always see what the difference is between...
Well, it was like a love letter, wasn't
it? Exactly.
You proposed via text?
Yeah.
How come? Just spur of the
Because I
moment?
can never get a word in edgewise. That's why.
No,
It
the
took
truth is because she was surrounded by adoring
lecherous men, and I couldn't get to speak to them. So I sent her
I went to the wedding. It was a fantastic wedding. It was a really great day.
12 years ago yesterday.
Is it 12
happy
years?
wedding anniversary.
It seems much longer. The hottest day of the year, Biggins. Remember that?
Oh, I remember.
Was it?
It was a hot day. It was a hot day.
Sweaty wedding.
There were a lot of staggering around people. The alcohol was huge that
It
day.
was really worst. I remember you telling me I would maybe carry this off camera.
Yeah.
But
I think so, because it could be
a
embarrassing.
few drunk people there, by all accounts. Anyway, Emily, online safety. Lord Frost shares fears for free speech online. I tell you what, every other day I hear more from Lord Frost. He's certainly got a hotline to the papers and the broadcasters, hasn't he?
Yeah, so he's been responding to a report by the Institute of Economic Affairs, which is where I work during the day, and we had a report out on the online safety bill and how it's a threat to free speech, privacy and innovation. And Lord Frost is one of the Conservatives, one of the former ministers, who's also very concerned by this bill, and he said that it will have a chilling effect on free speech, because essentially speech that is legal but harmful, deemed harmful by Ofcom and essentially the Secretary of State, Nadine Dorries, then it will be forced to be removed, because there are so many obligations on tech companies. So, you know, this is the concern, and I think there's more and more voices against this bill because it's just so breathtaking in its scope. It's something like 225 pages, puts all these obligations on companies. It will affect the small firms more because they won't be able to afford the lawyers and all the money to be able to comply with the obscene number of regulations. Of course, the counter is that, you know, we want to keep children safe online and, you know, people are very concerned with what children are seeing. But this legislation is not the way to go about it.
What stage is the legislation at?
I think it's at committee stage.
Oh, right.
So it's quite far through.
This is safety bells.
Safety bill.
Oh, bill.
This is online safety. Online
safety.
safety.
I'm a little confused there.
Not car seats. No, we're well into car seats.
Safety belts, they're anti-free speech.
Oh, that was very odd. Oh, dear, how stupid. Oh, dear, oh, dear.
But very amusing. Very amusing.
Good for a giggle.
Christopher Bigners, Eamonn Carver, thank you
We're
both
out of
very
time.
much
Thank
indeed.
you.
Thank you. Thanks for this
Thank you very much.
As always, great.
The Prince of Wales is facing controversy after the Sunday Times reported that he accepted a suitcase full of cash. It was a big suitcase. It was a lot of cash. It was a charitable donation from the former Prime Minister of Qatar.
Well, the reports prompted calls for the government and the Charity Commission to investigate whether or not he accepted €3 million in cash from billionaire Sheikh Hamad bin Jassim bin Jabba Al Thani.
Could you just repeat that?
I went for it.
Known as what, bin for short.
A former Qatari prince will do. Stop at you. For more, let's speak to the editor-in-chief of Majesty magazine, Ingrid Stewart. Very good morning to you, Ingrid. Look, if this was
I know Ingrid. Can I say hello? Hello, Ingrid.
Hello.
Hello,
Christopher.
Have a quick chat.
How are you, darling?
I'm very well, thank you.
Oh, good. It's nice to see you on this lovely morning.
Absolutely.
Anyway, talk about what you're going to talk about. I'm sorry to interrupt.
That's all right. OK, well, look, Ingrid, I'll interject if I may. If this was anybody else, if we were talking about Eamonn Holmes receiving a suitcase of cash from a Qatari prince,
certainly
if we
wouldn't
were
be here
talking
today
about
if it
Boris
did.
Johnson receiving a suitcase of cash, which, of course, in itself isn't illegal, there would be serious scrutiny and questions. So is Prince Charles getting special treatment because he's heir to the throne?
Well, I'm a great Prince Charles fan, but I do feel that his judgment is wrong in this case, because anyone, whoever they are, receiving a bag or a suitcase or a hold-all of that much cash must feel a little awkward. It's just, it's a very unusual thing. But of course, Prince Charles, I'm sure, would say in his defense that he's very sensitive to the Qataris and how they think, and the Arab mind, which would be that there's nothing wrong in giving cash. That's what they deal with. But can you imagine anyone walking into the Queen's private sitting room and giving her a hold-all of cash? I think it's the fact that the Prime Minister, Mr. Hamad, let's call him, felt that he could actually walk into Clarence House and give Prince Charles his cash without any eyebrows being raised, any questions being asked. It is quite strange, and Prince Charles must have felt very uncomfortable. He immediately passed the cash on to his staff, who immediately, after they'd counted it, they did say, then gave it to Coutts Bank. But it must have made him feel uncomfortable. And of course, today he's been criticised by everyone, all the people, commentators in newspapers for a lack of judgment. And however much you like him, and I do, it does look like it's a bit of a failure of judgment on his part.
No. So what would, I mean, for instance, say this was Prince Andrew receiving this, I think the headlines would be, you know, really fueled by that and be 10 times worse. But how come then it was not the practice of someone like Prince Philip for his charities or the Queen? What is the difference in the line, or how they would see themselves? They would always obviously see themselves as being sullied or being compromised or being put in a position where they could be compromised by receiving this. What is the difference of thinking between the way they would think and Prince Charles would think?
Well, I think for a start, the Queen's private secretary would never allow anyone into her private sitting room carrying a holdall, let alone a holdall of cash, because he would consider that would be, extremely difficult and offensive situation for her to deal with. I think that they wouldn't put themselves in that position of not having a member of their team with them. And unusually, Charles normally has somebody with him, a private secretary, on these meetings, but unusually he was on his own with the Sheikh. So I think the blame must be laid at his feet, that he thought, well, maybe he knew he was going to receive the money for his charities. I mean, nobody's criticizing him for stealing the money or anything like that. Absolutely not. It was going straight to the charity. But I think what people are saying is, how could he be that naive as to think this wasn't eventually going to cause some trouble? And Philip and the Queen would never, ever have put themselves in that kind of situation.
And I suppose, Ingrid, the problem with this particular incident, I mean, Prince Charles isn't apolitical, is he? We know, and he's spoken out about so many issues over the years. The worry is that if somebody's giving him a large sum of money, it's because they're trying to buy influence. And we know, in particular, with the Qataris, for example, Prince Charles had written to them specifically about the Chelsea barracks, objecting to them, and that got scrapped as a consequence of it. It gets a bit convoluted when you've got a royal who's quite involved in politics, and then there's a lot of money flying around.
Absolutely. I mean, this happened, 10 years ago, or almost 10 years ago. So, I mean, it's quite strange that it's come out now. And also, it's rather bad luck for Prince Charles, because he'd just given some extremely good speeches at the Commonwealth Heads of Government Conference, and especially a really thoughtful and moving speech about slavery and the Windrush generation and what we should do. And people were really listening to him. And then you get this story. It's almost like someone has held this in abeyance until they can really whack him with it.
Well, OK, we'll leave it there. Thank you very much indeed. Good talking to you, as always, Ingrid Seward there from Majesty Magazine. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Meanwhile, at the G7 today, the Prime Minister is expected to call on world leaders to take action to get essential food out of Ukraine. We have got the Secretary of State for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, George Eustace, going to be talking to him. And also we're going to be finding about Ghislaine Maxwell, placed now on suicide watch in New York. All that, plus the editor of the Daily Mail, Andrew Pearce, in the next half hour.
Looking ahead to today's weather, and the UK is looking rather unsettled for a time, with showery conditions gradually spreading eastwards. Let's take a look at the details. So, by the middle of the day, the worst of the showers should be clearing from southwest England to leave most parts dry with some sunny spells. However, temperatures will be disappointing for late June. Meanwhile, showers will be breaking out more widely across the southeast, and here a few of them could turn heavy with a chance of some thunder. Across Wales, 1 or 2 light showers are likely, but drier and brighter weather will gradually be spreading in across the country from the west. A few heavy and possibly thundery showers will affect the East Midlands, whilst across Birmingham and other more western areas the showers will start to ease, with more in the way of sunshine developing. Across northeast England, a mix of bright spells and scattered locally heavy and perhaps thundery downpours are on the cards, with temperatures close to 20 degrees in the sunniest spots. Edinburgh and other eastern parts of mainland Scotland could also catch some hefty showers around noon, but across the rest of Scotland the showers should be less heavy and fewer in number. The middle of the day doesn't look too bad for Northern Ireland though, as here any showers will be very isolated, with most parts staying dry and at times quite bright. Heavy showers then will ease across eastern parts to leave a mostly fine end to the day, although rain will arrive across Northern Ireland later. And that's how your weather is shaping up for the rest of your Monday.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
The Prime Minister urges world leaders to stand firm against Russia during a crucial G7 summit.
A very good morning. Good to have you on board. The time just after 9 o'clock, Monday 27th of June.
This is Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn, Holmes and Isabel Webster. Here's what's leading the news this morning.
The Prime Minister will address world leaders at the G7 summit today, where he's expected to ask them to take urgent action to end Russia's grip on global food prices. We'll be speaking to the Environment Secretary George Eustice very shortly on this.
Missiles have struck Kyiv for the first time in 3 weeks. The city's mayor, Vitaly Klitschko, called the attacks an attempt to intimidate Ukraine ahead of a speech by President Zelensky to the G7 leaders today.
Also today, Wimbledon starts. Full capacity crowds for the first time since the start of the pandemic. All eyes on Emma Raducanu and Sir Andy Murray as they take to centre court on day one.
And you can join in any of our discussions by emailing gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet us at gbnews.
We're also on the lookout for what is termed a People's Champion. Thanks for your early nominations on this one, because if someone you know, someone in your street, in your community deserves a special shout out for being a special person, please do get in touch with us and nominate them.
Yeah, email us with the subject Breakfast People's Champion, and we'll do our best to bring you some positive news from your community.
Ghislaine Maxwell has been placed on suicide watch in prison in Brooklyn in the United States.
She'll find out today if her sentencing, which is scheduled to take place tomorrow, will be postponed because of that decision.
Well, earlier in the programme, we heard from lawyer Lisa Bloom. Lisa Bloom represents victims of Jeffrey Epstein.
My clients have been waiting a long time to see justice, and we feel like we're very close right now. And it's very disappointing to see Ghislaine Maxwell want to put that off. I don't think the judge is going to buy it. I think the judge is going to say that the sentencing will happen tomorrow because we need to move this forward.
What does it do to the victims, Lisa, who hear yet of another delay? It marches them to the top of the hill, and then they must feel as if they're going to be marched down again. That must be very just undermining for them.
You're right, and it is exhausting and it is dispiriting, but they also know that this is going to happen. And I tell my clients that even if the sentencing gets put off, it will probably be only for a few days, maybe for a week. Ultimately, it's going to happen. I think Ghislaine Maxwell knows she's going to spend the rest of her life in prison. She's going to probably get a very significant sentence. The prosecution is asking for 30 years. She's 61 years old, I think, so she's probably going to spend the rest of her days behind bars.
How would you describe her, Lisa? For people who, may think that she is an innocent caught up in the maelstrom of all of this, that Epstein pulled all the strings, what's your view of the woman?
Well, it's not just my view, it's what the jury said. The jury said that she is responsible for the choices that she made. And those choices were sex trafficking underage girls to Jeffrey Epstein, who's one of the most prolific predators of our time. She personally was involved in sexually abusing some of them, and she made their lives a living hell. And they have to spend the rest of their lives with the fallout of the choices that she made, that they were trafficked to this man, they were sexually abused when they were underage, and it's just been devastating to them.
There's been lots of speculation since the end of the trial that she may enter into some sort of plea bargaining to try and reduce her sentence. Is there much suggestion that she might, perhaps produce some names to try and reduce the amount of time that she spends behind bars, or has she been uncooperative in that respect?
Yes, many people have speculated about that, but there doesn't seem to be any sign of it. I don't think the government wants to make any kind of deal with her. They got their conviction. It was a hard-fought trial. She had outstanding attorneys who made every point they could on her behalf, and the jury rejected all of that and convicted her. And now she's looking at a very significant sentence. So why should the state want to make any kind of a deal with her? I just don't see that happening.
Yeah. But Lisa, what happens to the victims that you are representing now? Can you give us an insight into their lives, how empowered they feel with what's going on, how they're rebuilding, if they are rebuilding their lives?
Well, they are, because we fought for and won very significant financial settlements with Jeffrey Epstein's estate, and I'm pleased that we were able to get that for all 8 of my clients. And they take that money to use for therapy, for medical expenses, to go back to school, to start a new life. So it really makes a big difference for them, and they are moving forward with their lives. But this prosecution of Ghislaine Maxwell has meant a lot to them. It meant that they have been heard, that this matter wasn't just swept under the rug after Jeffrey Epstein took his own life in prison a couple of years ago. And it just means a lot to see accountability against Ghislaine Maxwell.
Good. We'll leave it there. Lawyer Lisa Bloom there on the people who are suing Ghislaine Maxwell. Her sentence will be passed tomorrow in New York.
Now, it's Wimbledon fortnight. It's an exciting tennis beckons as the 2022 Wimbledon Championships start today. The tournament will return to full capacity for the first time in 3 years.
So, what can you expect from this year's event? And most importantly, how are the British hopefuls looking? Joining us now, our reporter Ellie Costello, who's part of a big, long queue outside the actual courts. Hi, Ellie.
You're right, Ellie.
Hello, I just got hit by a football. The people playing football in the middle of this queue, they're keeping themselves occupied because some of the people have been in this queue since 4 o'clock this morning. They're very dedicated fans. Check this out. Hundreds of people are queuing, hoping for on-the-day tickets. It did have quite a lot of movement. This is just the end of the queue here, but they're really enjoying the sunshine. Look, people have got their papers out. They've got their picnic blankets. Really good atmosphere here. Lots of people absolutely buzzing to be at Wimbledon for the first time. properly in 3 years. It was cancelled in 2020. It was about 50% capacity in 2021 and now at full capacity, including this queue. And you might even be able to see over there's tents in the background of that queue. Some people have been here since last week. Thursday and Friday they arrived, and they're hoping to get really good seats today or tomorrow. But I've been talking to people in the queue this morning, asking them what they're most looking forward to, and this is what they told me.
Yeah, Wimbledon, of course. It's just such a big tournament, and it's so so exclusive. It's good to be part of that.
This is my Andy Murray hat. It's been on the go since 2013. I just love the whole atmosphere. It's just lovely. Just love the place. It's just been coming every year since 2013, apart from 2. I've missed 2 since then. So.
And what's it like to be back after the coronavirus?
Oh, it's lovely to have normal life back.
So we came all the way from Poland. We came, 5 a.m.?
Yes.
5 a.m., yes.
And this is a present to your dad, isn't it?
It is. Do you like your present?
Yes, I think this is very For me, I was very happy because my son remember every year of my birthday. And this day, I was 60 years old, and it's very nice. The best gift for me in my life.
Happy birthday to him. What a lovely gift from his son. I've got a little bit of pop trivia, though, for you, Ellie. I'm going to put you on the spot because I was telling Eamonn and our viewers and listeners at home I worked at Wimbledon after university. Well, according to the internet, Wimbledon's renowned for being the largest single annual sporting catering operation carried out in Europe. But hazard a guess, OK? How many servings of strawberries and cream do you think are portioned out during the fortnight? Take a wild guess. What do you think?
Oh,
no idea.
10,000.
There's got to be
200,000.
Is that all?
That's a lot of strawberries and cream.
You're going to tell me 200 million or something. So there's 42,000 people in there today, and if they had a portion each, you multiply that by what? How many days is there?
Yeah, but not everyone that goes to Wimbledon has strawberries. Anyway, yeah, I don't know, but I thought that was interesting. 200,000 portions of strawberry. And let me tell you, when I worked in debentures, admittedly, that is the really expensive bit. Loads of lobster. I don't know the stat,
loads
but
of
loads.
lobster.
Loads. Anyway, sorry,
Lobster's
Ellie.
nice, but it's just getting it out of the shell's the hard bit.
Yeah, that's the tricky bit. So make sure you get yourself a little bit of strawberries and cream, Ellie, before you leave SW19 today.
Oh, I will. Yeah, that sounds good, doesn't it? It would only be polite, wouldn't it, to have some Pimm's, strawberry and cream today.
It's part of the job.
Thanks very much,
Ellie.
It's fascinating listening to that woman talking about it's great to see life returning to normal. That's the British way, isn't it? Seeing as cues as part of normal life anyway. We're going to talk to the Environment Secretary, George Eustice, about Ukraine, about Russia's stranglehold on food supplies and what it's doing to the price of living here. Also the consultant editor of the Daily Mail, that's Andrew Pearce. All to come right after this break.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Now, later this morning, the Prime Minister will call on world leaders to take urgent action to get essential food supplies out of Ukraine, and he's going to do this at the G7 summit.
Yeah, Johnson has previously criticised the UN's suggested response to the Russian blockade of seaports as being insufficient, warning that Putin's actions could cause an international famine due to shortages of critical crops such as grain. Well, in the last few moments, the Prime Minister has been speaking from the Alps. Let's have a listen to what he had to say.
The logic of the position is still so clear. There is no deal that the President Zelensky can really do. So in those circumstances, the G7 supporters of Ukraine around the world have to continue to help the Ukrainians to rebuild their economy, to get their grain out, to export their grain. And of course, we have to help them to protect themselves. And that's what we're going to continue to do.
OK, well, easy to say all of that. Let's go to George Eustace. George is the Secretary of State for the Environment, Food and Rural Affairs. Mr Eustace, good morning to you. So all we got to do is to negotiate these Russian blockades around various ports and just get the Ukrainians to sneak all their grain out. It's as simple as that.
Well, it's not simple at all. And so there are two things that could be done. One would be to try to get a safe passage out through the Black Sea, but that is very difficult because Ukraine themselves have closed the port at Odessa for security reasons, and there's a lot of mines there and very few commercial shipping companies are willing to take the risk of sending ships to the Black Sea at the moment. The alternative would be to try to find a way of getting it out by land, probably by rail, but that would include and require some investment in repairing some of the rail infrastructure. So it is a challenge, but it's an important issue for us to focus on. There's around 25 million tonnes of wheat stranded in Odessa at the moment. We know as well that the Russians have been stealing some Ukrainian wheat, so the UK is also making available the technology we have to test for provenance so that we can make sure that the Russians aren't able to sell that stolen wheat on the international market. But it's going to be quite a high issue on the agenda at G7 this week.
Sorry, Minister. The Prime Minister comes out. I could say that. I could make up anything and say it, and no one questions it. This is what he's talking about is a mission impossible. At the very least, the consequence of what he's talking about is to provide military escorts, military naval escorts by sea, and what it is by land, I don't know. Surely this is just all talk.
Well, I don't accept that, and we need to think about what we can do to try to help Ukraine get that grain out of store. Because the other problem is they have successfully drilled and planted. Well, not necessarily. So there would be one issue would be to try to find a way of getting it out through the Black Sea. That's very, very challenging, is my understanding. So a more likely route would be to try to find a way of getting it out into the world market by a rail route. But these are the sorts of things we have to address, because if we don't, those stores will they won't be able to get that grain on the world market, for one. But secondly, the crop that Ukraine has this year will also not have a place to go into store unless those stores can be cleared of last year's stock.
Yeah, hugely important, and the real threat of famine looming large, frankly. And that's why, presumably then, Secretary of State, the Prime Minister will today be trying to encourage G7 leaders to repurpose land that's used to grow biofuels at the moment and try and use it to try and grow food. Now, according to the Telegraph this morning, this isn't likely to be very well received by Washington.
Well, we think this is the right thing to do because we believe you could temporarily reduce the amount of maize and wheat going into biofuels And that would, in the short term, give you a significant increase in additional maize in particular on the world market, and that would help to ease prices down and make sure the world can get access to the food that it needs. We always knew the US would be a bit more sceptical about this because they rely more on biofuels for their petrol to go in their cars. We knew that would be the case, but we still think it's the right thing to do. And we need to now work to reassure them that actually it isn't going to cause the sort of problems that they worry about.
Well, they're not just worried about isolationism, as some farmers might describe it, but they're also worried about not being able to meet their climate commitments. And do you not think that's something that other G7 members, including ourselves, should be mindful of?
Well, the truth is, as a temporary measure, at a time when the world hasn't got enough supply of food, and there are some real concerns being raised by the UN about famine in parts of the world, you need to act to deal with that imperative. And of course, in the long run, there's a role for biofuels, there's a role for decarbonising other elements of agriculture, having a different approach to fertilisers, for instance, and so forth. That's a longer-term trajectory, and a lot of work is going on to the R&D in that space. But in the immediate situation we have now, we have to make sure that, as much as possible, the wheat and the maize that is being grown in the world is able to be reserved for our food supplies in the world.
It is just all slightly ironical that, you know, you cannot get food out of mainland Britain hardly into Northern Ireland, another part of the UK, and yet we're talking about, you know, liberating Ukraine and using all their grain elsewhere. And the key to both of this, of course, is the European Union.
Yes, and we can get food at the moment from GB to Northern Ireland, but only because the provisions of the protocol aren't yet being fully implemented, and there are certain easements that are in place. And what we need to do is to put these sorts of arrangements on a permanent footing. That's why we're introducing a new bill on the Northern Ireland Protocol. The European Union have refused so far to change their mandate or engage sufficiently in the detail of how to make the protocol work. So it falls to the UK government, obviously, to legislate to bring legal clarity in this space, and that's what we intend to do.
George Eustace, what have you made of Le Bromance, as it's being dubbed? Prime Minister Boris Johnson cozying up to President Macron, putting their previous tensions to one side. Lots of people suggesting this could be because they've got a lot in common. They've got lots of problems domestically. Here in the UK, the Prime Minister talking perhaps delusionally about a third term. Meanwhile, we hear reports that yet more letters are being submitted to the 1922 Committee of No Confidence in him. I mean, there's never going to stop with Prime Minister Boris Johnson, is it? This endless cycle?
Well, I think people can overanalyse these things. The truth is that G7 leaders always work very closely on the challenges of the time. We hosted G7 in Cornwall last year and made some really significant progress on some important agenda items. I'm sure they'll do the same again this week. But look, on the Prime Minister's general sort of challenges and the very, very disappointing results we had, obviously, in those by-elections last year, my view is that we need to double down on delivering the manifesto that we were elected on and making sure that we deal with some of these huge global challenges that have been thrown our way. I think this Prime Minister is the right person to do that, and I think now would be a disastrous time to try and have some distraction and a leadership challenge running on for months when there are so many urgent global issues that need our attention.
Secretary of State, thanks for your time this morning. Appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Joining us now, the consultant editor of the Daily Mail there.
Good morning.
I'm lost for words sometimes. I mean, I just honestly think this Prime Minister can go to a world stage and he can spout anything that has absolutely no substance whatsoever. You just listen there. There was no detail how we would get grain out of Ukraine and without a naval blockade, and let people facing facts that you're going to have naval escorts to take stuff out of Odessa and other ports like it. But, you know, without that, how does it happen?
Well, it doesn't. The only other way is if we sink the Russian ships, which are blockading the ports. But we're not going to war with Russia because that's Ukraine's war. NATO is not going to do that. Britain's not going to do that. So it is pie in the sky. And the idea that they're going to put in some rail infrastructure which the Russians can continue to bomb.
Yes, which would put Russia at war with us.
It would.
Surely.
Yeah.
It would
so
have to.
We're stuck. And of course, the Prime Minister wants to get the grain out to help Ukraine, but he also wants to get the grain out because of the soaring costs of food in this country. We're heavily dependent on
this
Ukraine.
grain ends up in Africa. in Eastern Africa, most of it, because that's where it's needed most, and they're the biggest consumers and have the biggest need, it appears.
Look, I've always been a sceptic about these wretched summits. They're just great big talking shops and photo opportunities. And we've seen Biden blundering and whinging on. I mean, I can't remember what even came out of G7 in Cornwall last year. Something to do with vaccines, as I recall. But does anybody remember?
I can just remember Carrie Johnson admitting she'd never been to Cornwall before, and I got a black mark against mine.
So, and then he's off to NATO, and he's got to be wary, the Prime Minister, because he's trying to burnish his credentials on the world stage as an international statesman. Remember Mrs Thatcher in 1990 when she was up against Michael Heseltine in that leadership contest? She chose to go to Paris for an international summit, which everybody forgot instantly on the day she should have been in the Commons pressing MPs to vote for her. She was gone within 24 hours. Be wary.
So you're aware that
circling.
You think while he's away, it gives people who oppose him more opportunity to meet in the tea rooms and whatever?
Yeah, because some of his key people are with him in Bavaria, and then they'll be with him in NATO, and he's been away since last week. It's a long time, and that's when the cat's away, the mice will play, and the scheming and plotting will continue, not least because of those by-election results. Look, all governments lose by-elections mid-term. The swing against them in Devon, the Tiverton seat, was nearly 30%. Huge. Of course, there were special circumstances. The ghastly Tory MP who resigned had been looking at porn in the Commons chamber, and again in Wakefield, where they lost on a 12% swing. Not so good for Labour, actually. They should have won bigger. There was special circumstances there because the Tory MP had been banged up for interfering with somebody under the age of 16. But very bad results, and it's shaken the confidence in the Prime Minister. And then he says, I'm thinking about my third term. Now, could the Prime Minister just sort out the first term first and the cost of living crisis, and don't start talking about the third term? Thatcher said, I'm going on and on. She was gone within months.
Talking of Thatcher, Nicola Sturgeon invoking Thatcher memories, but sort of unlikely link there.
Yeah, she says if Mrs Thatcher was around, she would support another referendum on on independence in Scotland. Is she clairvoyant? She spoke to a medium. Mrs Thatcher's been dead for 9 years. I don't think she's got any clue whatsoever what Mrs Thatcher wants. But Mrs Thatcher was a passionate champion of the Union, and she, in my view, she wouldn't be supporting another referendum. Bear in mind, Sturgeon and Alex Salmond, who was then the leader, did say at the last referendum, once-in-a-lifetime vote. That was 8 years ago.
My friend, I don't know what you're like with travelling, or if you have you been on holiday recently? Were you away for a break or something?
The last time I went away was a few weeks ago to France, and it was horrific.
Right, because I'm seeing front page of the Star here today, and they have pictures of people queuing for flights, fighting with anybody and everybody. This is Bristol Airport, this particular one. Isabel's husband was away yesterday. What sort of delay did he feel?
7.5 hour delay coming back from Schiphol in Amsterdam.
His plane was cancelled without him being...
No, the plane hadn't even left Heathrow when he was already at the gate in Schiphol, and they hadn't even been told that there was a delay. And there were children and screaming. I mean, it was miserable, basically.
I mean, I have a flight in 2 weeks' time to Belfast, cancelled. And the point is, I would look, if I had young kids, the idea of queuing or risking being delayed at an airport, I just forget it. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think people are going to have to discover the great staycation, where, mind you, everyone's going to be pretty booked because of the flight chaos. These airlines should be shot, frankly. They sacked far too many people. They didn't anticipate the huge surge in demand after the pandemic. Why? I knew everybody would want to go abroad to get some sun. And they've been too slow in recruiting new staff. And they don't pay them enough. That's the other problem.
That's the other factor you've got to face,
Really low pay. And they lost their jobs during the pandemic, so these people have found other jobs, better paid. And now we hear British Airways ground crew, ground staff, are going to go on strike for a 10% pay rise. It's madness.
Doesn't fill you full of...
No. Used to be the world's favourite airline. It's appalling now, isn't it? British Airways, the service. You get a bag of crisps, plain, and a small.
But they're not British anymore. They're owned by the Spanish.
I know. And so is the airport, Heathrow Airport.
Yeah, that's right.
How do we let our crown jewels fall into foreign hands?
The biggest money-making con of the lot of them is whatever your airport is, Glasgow, Belfast, Heathrow, whatever, that it's a fiver to drop anybody off outside the front door. And they do this in the name of the environment.
Yeah, right.
A lot of nonsense.
Yeah, complete nonsense.
Speaking of strikes, strikes. We're going to talk about David Lammy.
No, we're not.
Oh, we're not. We're wrapping.
The programme finished 2 minutes
I've
ago.
run out of talkback. Sorry, I've not heard a sound in my ear. I think my battery must have died. Sorry. I was going to chat
Thanks.
all day to you. It would be
I'd
such
have
a
enjoyed
pleasure,
it.
Andrew. Yeah.
Thanks, Andrew. Really appreciate it. That's it. We're going to be back tomorrow morning, 6 through to 9:30 to do it all again. All we need is your company. And Tom Harwood is up next with The Briefing. Have yourselves a good day and thanks for watching.
Looking ahead to today's weather, and the UK is looking rather unsettled for a time, with showery conditions gradually spreading eastwards. Let's take a look at the details. So, by the middle of the day, the worst of the showers should be clearing from southwest England to leave most parts dry with some sunny spells. However, temperatures will be disappointing for late June. Meanwhile, showers will be breaking out more widely across the southeast, and here a few of them could turn heavy with a chance of some thunder. Across Wales, 1 or 2 light showers are likely, but drier and brighter weather will gradually be spreading in across the country from the west. A few heavy and possibly thundery showers will affect the East Midlands, whilst across Birmingham and other more western areas the showers will start to ease, with more in the way of sunshine developing. Across northeast England, a mix of bright spells and scattered locally heavy and perhaps thundery downpours are on the cards, with temperatures close to 20 degrees in the sunniest spots. Edinburgh and other eastern parts of mainland Scotland could also catch some hefty showers around noon, but across the rest of Scotland the showers should be less heavy and fewer in number. The middle of the day doesn't look too bad for Northern Ireland though, as here any showers will be very isolated, with most parts staying dry and at times quite bright. Heavy showers then will ease across eastern parts to leave a mostly fine end to the day, although rain will arrive across Northern Ireland later. And that's how your weather is shaping up for the rest of your Monday.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.